What's up, guys? Don't forget to smash that like button, drop a comment, hype up the video, and if you're new here, hit that subscribe and join the family. Guys, if you want to support the channel and get something cool, check the first link in the description. Use my code HugoHenriqueMore to get 10% off on anime lamps. 3 years ago, Earth underwent drastic changes. Animals and plants began evolving in insane and inexplicable ways. To protect the world from destruction and preserve peace, humans awakened the power to control monsters and use them in battle. Those who gained this ability became known as monster trainers. A woman slammed the blackboard, demanding the class's attention and shouting that monster trainers should focus more. Her name was Murong Cheye, teacher of Class 3, second year, at Chang'an 3rd Secondary School. She explained that this event marked the beginning of a new era for Earth and reminded everyone that it would be on the exam. The bell rang and the teacher ended the class, warning that the monster breeder exam would take place the next day and recommending they watch it with their parents. Leaving school, a boy named Gao Peng, 18 years old and a student of Chang'an 3rd Secondary School, walked deep in thought. His greatest goal was to become a monster trainer. However, something strange had been happening. Ever since turning 18, he started seeing panels floating before his eyes. One of them read, "Dear host, congratulations on successfully activating the Monster Evolution System. This system can help you identify relevant information about any creature. Please make good use of it." The system displayed precise details: species, level, grade, attribute, condition, weakness, and even the requirements for future evolution. Gao Peng arrived home wondering if he was going crazy from stress. As he climbed the stairs, he heard a noise and looked to the side. There was a strange spider. The system immediately identified it. Species: striped gray plate spider. Level 3. Grade: normal. Attribute: wood. Condition: healthy, irritated. Weakness: fire. Upgrade requirement: excellent grade. He stared at the panel, astonished by how real it seemed, remembering it was Grandma Chen's pet spider. Teacher Murong had said that kind of spider was usually docile, but suddenly it leapt from the wall toward him. He shouted that there was nothing gentle about it and dodged quickly, running upstairs while calling for his grandmother. Sure, the spider wanted to eat him. The creature shot webs but missed, and Gao Peng realized how fast it was, panic rising. He wondered what to do, then remembered the system message. Its weakness was fire. Quickly, he lit a lighter and threw it, causing a small explosion that set the spider ablaze. Yet he realized the weak fire wasn't enough. Burning, the spider became even angrier, jumping up the stairs with killing intent. A red warning flashed before his eyes. It was just more enraged. Desperate, he ran faster, shouting that he only had one floor left. If he made it, Dazi would help. He sprinted with the spider close behind, its legs clattering against the steps, fear pushing him to keep moving. Finally, as he reached his door, the spider leapt to grab him. Gao Peng shouted for Dazi, who flung the door open so hard it hit the creature straight on. The impact sent it flying back, and another monster emerged, making the spider tremble with fear. The protagonist stood beside Dazi and asked with a half-smile if it still wanted to fight. The spider backed away and then fled, climbing up the walls until it disappeared. Peng watched and commented that it sure ran fast, but he'd let it go this time. Anyone who makes a contract with a monster can communicate through a mental link. Dazi, still grumbling, said he was starving and asked why his master came home so late, nearly fainting from hunger. The creature had two forms: combat and rest. Out of combat, its body shrank to conserve energy and heal minor wounds. Peng reassured him, patting his familiar and saying he'd make something to eat soon. He asked Dazi to hang the bag on the rack and headed to the kitchen. The boy grabbed a knife, spinning it between his fingers, muttering it was time to show his true skills. He then sliced meat and vegetables with incredible speed, and within minutes, a fragrant, nutritious dinner was ready. Dazi smelled it and began drooling, saying he couldn't wait any longer. Peng laughed and told him to eat slower or he'd choke. As he watched his companion eat, the system reappeared, showing his monster's data. Species: purple-backed yellow-clawed centipede. Level 7. Grade: normal. Attributes: yin, poison. Condition: healthy, happy. Weakness: lightning. Upgrade requirement: excellent grade. Reading that last part, Peng was stunned. Could requirement for excellent grade mean his familiar could evolve from an ordinary monster to a higher grade one? The thought left him speechless. Such evolutions were extremely rare. Monster grades range from normal to excellent to perfect, and the higher the grade, the greater the potential. Excited, he thought that if Dazi could truly evolve, maybe one day they'd reach the perfect grade together, something legendary, reserved for leaders among monsters. Overjoyed, Peng hugged his companion, promising to help him reach the new level no matter what. Dazi wobbled from the affection, his antennae twitching. The protagonist looked back at the panel and tapped the upgrade requirements. The screen changed. Evolution requirements for excellent grade. Shadow grass, a special plant that grows in areas with strong yin energy, extremely beneficial for monsters of that attribute. Required 10 stalks. Luminous wood, a rare material born when lightning strikes a tree with affinity to wood and thunder attributes. Required 500 grams. The Thunder Core crystal was a rare item from a thunder attribute monster's body, filled with immense electrical energy. Only one was needed. The protagonist noted that Shadowgrass would be easy to find, and luminous wood could be bought, but the Thunder Core crystal would be the hardest. He analyzed the situation. Crystals of common elemental types cost around 8 alliance credits, and one from a rare element like thunder would be at least 10. Closing the system window, he sighed that it was too expensive. Since the Allied government's founding in the New World, a unified currency had been created: Alliance dollars and Alliance credits. Credits were a high-tier currency where $10,000 equaled 1 credit. When his parents died in that accident, the government had granted him 20 credits in pension. Now only 11 remained. With that, he could still afford the materials for Dazi's evolution, but they'd be left with no money to live on. After eating, Dazi went to his master complaining he was still hungry. Peng stared at him in disbelief, asking if he really was a centipede. Annoyed, Dazi stood up and demanded more food. Peng laughed and promised another dish. Soon he handed it over, warning not to complain if he got sick. Watching Dazi devour the meal, he thought money truly was the biggest problem in the world. He had the recipe for evolution, but no resources to make it happen. Frustrating. Suddenly, an idea struck him. If the system was real, maybe he could become a true monster breeder. Discovering how to evolve a monster's grade had always been a mystery breeders tried to solve. And if he could access that information freely, he could become the greatest breeder of all. A grin spread across his face as he laughed, saying that when that day came, he'd have all the money he wanted. Then he remembered his teacher's announcement about the breeder exam the next day. Quickly, he grabbed his phone and searched the registration site, hoping it wasn't too late. Finding the page, he saw only 3 minutes left and immediately confirmed his entry. The system processed it and displayed a success message. He must appear at 9 o'clock the next morning at Chang'an City's Monster Breeder Division. Happy, Peng raised his phone and shouted that he'd do his best. The next day, he went next door and knocked. A beautiful woman, still sleepy and wearing pajamas, answered. It was Tang Tang, Peng's charming neighbor. Embarrassed, he greeted her and explained that he was taking the exam, asking if she could look after Dazi for a few days. Tang Tang, delighted by the small familiar, gladly agreed and promised to take good care of him. Peng smiled and thanked her, saying that with her watching Dazi, he could focus on the exam in peace. Before rushing off, he promised her dinner when he returned. Tang Tang smiled and wished him luck, saying she'd look forward to that meal. However, once he left, her smile vanished. She looked at Dazi with disgust, muttering that he was weak and ugly and wondering how Peng ended up with such a pathetic familiar. Dazi becomes irritated by the scornful look and prepares to attack, but Tang Tang quickly crouches, runs her hand over his head and strokes him, teasingly saying that Grandpa will be furious when he finds out about this. Inside her apartment, her phone rings. It's a call from her grandfather, the president. As soon as she answers, Tang Tang explains that she had called earlier only to report something. Peng made a contract with a purple-backed, yellow-clawed centipede of normal grade. The old man explodes in anger, shouting if that's true, outraged that a normal grade monster has such limited potential and will never have a future, demanding to know why she didn't stop the boy. Walking across the room, Tang Tang calmly replies that she couldn't stop him. His grandson is as determined as he is. Outwardly, they may seem indifferent, but inside, they're both equally stubborn and relentless. She reminds him that the centipede was left behind by his daughter and son-in-law, Peng's parents. With a sharp tone, she asks if the old man still hasn't finished what he set out to do, adding that perhaps it would be better to eliminate the disobedient and replace them with the obedient, since talent is something the world has in excess. She then looks out the window and sees Peng running down the street, sighs, and apologizes for saying too much, assuring him he doesn't need to worry because as long as she's around, the boy will never be in danger. She hangs up. In the president's office, a woman rushes in, asking if he called for her. With a cold expression, Ji Han Woo orders her to inform the experimental department that they have a 5-month deadline. If they fail to deliver results by then, they no longer need to exist. Regarding the Qinghai branch, he gives Li Yes 7 months to solve the problem, or he'll go there himself. The secretary trembles, bows, and says she'll carry out his orders immediately. Ji Han Woo, now calmer, picks up the phone, looks at a photo of himself with Peng, and murmurs that he'll set everything right within a year at most. He promises his grandson that once he returns, he'll never suffer again. In the city of Chang'an, the Monster Breeder Division building is packed. Peng looks around amazed by the crowd, commenting that Becoming a monster breeder has really become a trend. Suddenly, he hears a familiar voice and turns to see his friend Li Zigong, accompanied by Zhang Hong and Li Hongdu. He smiles and greets them. Zhang Hong asks if he came to watch the exam, but Zigong laughs, proudly pointing at his mother, saying they're there to see her take the test. Even though she's failed 3 times before, he insists she'll pass this time. Hongdu lightly taps her brother's head, calling him an idiot. Zigong complains that she hits him so often he's actually turning stupid because of her, and she retorts that he's always been stupid, it has nothing to do with her. Slightly embarrassed, Peng interrupts the banter and reveals that he's also taking the exam. The three of them are surprised, and Zhang Hong places a hand on his shoulder with an encouraging smile, saying it's great to see him so determined, that he believes in him, and that maybe today they'll witness the birth of the youngest monster breeder in Chang'an. Peng laughs awkwardly, saying he's not that talented but will give it a try. At that moment, an unfamiliar voice cuts in, sarcastically asking who the youngest breeder in the city is supposed to be, mocking that the exam must be too easy if anyone thinks they can pass. Zigong gets angry and asks what that idiot just said, but his sister tries to hold him back. The man keeps provoking, saying it's ridiculous for a foolish kid to think he can become a monster breeder. Peng stares at him coldly and replies that if someone could become a breeder just by talking, that man would already be the best in the world. The blonde man gets annoyed and tells him to wait. Soon he'll see what that means. Zigong asks who that idiot is and how anyone could be worse than him, and Zhang Hong answers that it's Wang Shu, heir of the Wang group, someone who has failed the monster breeder exam 4 times. So seeing a young newcomer like Peng must have gotten under his skin. Suddenly the doors open and people begin shouting, announcing that the exam is starting. The head examiner of the Chang'an City Monster Breeder Division, Feng Shu, steps forward to welcome everyone. He declares that the exam will begin immediately and instructs everyone to enter and collect the written test in an orderly line. Inside the division hall, Feng Shu welcomes them again and explains that the evaluation consists of 2 parts, a theoretical test and a practical test. Peng listens carefully as Feng Shu emphasizes that they'll begin with the written exam. 3 videos will be shown on the screen behind him, and participants must accurately describe the monsters displayed. He turns on the screen and steps off the stage, saying he doesn't want to waste time, so the video starts right away. The first shows a monster swimming underwater, darting back and forth. When the screen goes dark, the chief examiner checks his watch and announces that was the first video. Everyone has 20 minutes to write their answers. People begin complaining, saying they've never seen that creature before, that it must be a new species, and the clip was too short to see anything clearly. They might have to try again next year. Feng Shu gets irritated and yells for everyone to shut up, warning that the next person who speaks will be immediately disqualified. Silence fills the room. Wang Shu smirks, thinking the written exam this year is harder than usual, but he's grateful for the insider information he received beforehand. Glancing at Peng sitting calmly beside him only makes him angrier. That idiot better enjoy laughing while he can. Meanwhile, Peng is fascinated, realizing the system seems to be responding to his thoughts and providing exactly the information he needs. The monster is a Gale dolphin. It enjoys soft music, tranquility, sunbathing, and eating fish and shrimp. Its weaknesses are darkness-type attacks and chaotic sound waves. Peng writes all of it down. The second video shows a monkey-like monster, and the system identifies it as the muscle gorilla. It likes climbing trees and eating bananas, is vulnerable to poison attacks, and has an impatient, easily irritated nature. The final video shows the third monster, identified as the claw mantis. It's strong, brave, and carnivorous, feeding on all kinds of insects, and its weakness is fire-based attacks. At exactly 10 o'clock, the examiner announces time is up and the tests are collected. Another proctor walks around gathering papers and asks everyone to wait for the results. An hour later, Feng Shu returns holding the papers and announces that the results are in, saying he will now read the names of those who passed. Liu Xueqin and Lin Celine are among them, and Zhang Hong also passes, sighing in relief when she sees her score of 81. Wang Shu, with 86 points, struts proudly, saying that was expected. Feng Shu taps the paper on the table and notes that everyone mentioned so far made a few mistakes but still passed, wishing them luck in the practical test. Wang Shu turns to Peng and says that if his name is Peng, he didn't hear it called, so maybe he didn't pass. The blonde keeps mocking, saying it's a shame. Looks like today won't be the birth of the city's youngest monster breeder after all. Peng listens silently, trembling with anxiety, thinking that's impossible. The system couldn't have been wrong. Just then, Feng Shu speaks again, saying there's one final name left on the list of those who passed. He asks the candidate to stand up. Confused, Peng rises and the examiner begins clapping, saying he truly didn't expect the candidate with a perfect score to be so young, praising the talent of the new generation. The crowd begins to murmur in admiration, saying he scored perfectly on the written exam, even though he's still in high school. Proof of an exceptionally bright future. Many whisper that they might be witnessing the rise of Chang'an's youngest monster breeder. Peng smiles and, looking directly at Wang Shu, says that Gao Peng has just been announced with a perfect score, apologizing for the disappointment. The blonde man seethes, shouting that the bastard just got lucky. As the announcement ends, the chief examiner leads all successful candidates into another room. Peng looks around, finding the place huge. Feng Shu welcomes them to the second phase, explaining that the practical test is simple. Each room behind him contains a monster provided by the association, and the goal is to increase that monster's grade within 1 week. He emphasizes that all necessary materials will be provided by the association, but anyone who fails to upgrade their monster must repay the market value of the resources used. There's also a strict limit on the amount of materials allowed. Exceeding it means automatic failure. At that moment, another figure walks in, clapping. It's Li Jin, manager of the Monster Breeder Division. He calls for everyone's attention, saying they'll now assign rooms and asking them to line up to draw a card from a red box. One by one, the candidates step forward to take their cards. As he waits, Peng thinks that since the selection is random, there's no way to know what kind of monster he'll have to handle, which explains why the Monster Breeder Certificate is one of the hardest to obtain. Wang Shu watches him closely, thinking he can't wait to see if Peng will stay confident once he finds out what card he drew. When Peng reaches into the box, he jokingly asks the heart of the cards to bring him luck. But as he tries to pull out a slip, a tiny creature bites the paper and refuses to let go. Both he and Li Jin notice the odd scene. Smiling, Zhang Hong says she got room 6 and asks Peng which one he picked. Peng smiles back and shows that he got room 10. Feng Shu then orders everyone to head to the rooms corresponding to their cards, declaring the practical exam officially begun. Peng walks to room 10 and is greeted by a man who introduces himself as Zhou Yuan. Peng shakes his hand with a polite smile, saying he'll be counting on his help. As Zhou Yuan swipes his card and opens the door to the 10th room, a terrifying roar echoes from within. So powerful it makes the floor tremble slightly. The moment Peng steps inside, the system immediately identifies the monster. Species: Red River Monkey. Level: 10. Grade: Normal. Attribute: Earth. Condition: Sick, dying. Weakness: Yin. Then another notification appears listing the requirements to evolve it to excellent grade. Peng grows uneasy and asks what happened to that monkey. Zhou Yuan explains grimly that it underwent countless experiments, which caused conflicting negative energies to build up inside its body. In truth, the creature should have been put down, but due to a lack of available test subjects, it was assigned for this trial. Earlier, Zhou Yuan had questioned the manager, asking why, among so many healthy monsters, they'd pick this one. On the phone, Li Jin told him not to worry. He had his own reasons. In that same call, he was speaking with Mr. Wang, assuring him that everything was going as planned and that the candidate wouldn't pass the practical test, not even if he were the greatest monster breeder in the world. Back in the present, Zhou Yuan sighs and says the monkey has only survived this long because of its incredible will to live, but the chances of recovery are extremely low, far beyond normal difficulty. He offers to help Peng register for the next exam, allowing him to start directly in the second phase. But Peng looks at the monkey locked in the cage, breathing weakly, body trembling, eyes filled with tears. He thanks Zhou Yuan for the offer, but firmly says he won't give up so easily. Zhou Yuan smiles faintly, saying he understands, and allows him to enter. As soon as Peng steps through, the door closes behind him. The monster, lying on the ground, trembles as tears roll down its face. In its mind, flashes of painful experiments and voices calling it useless torment its thoughts. It screams in despair, staring at Peng with raw suffering. Peng slowly approaches, places a hand on the monkey's head, and gently tells it not to worry. Just trust him because he'll do everything he can to help. Using the system, Peng analyzes the Red River monkey's evolution path, and the results shock him. The first screen shows the normal path: purify bodily impurities and evolve into an excellent grade Red River monkey. But then a second screen appears, darker, surrounded by a shadowy aura, offering an alternative: Yin path. Absorb Yin energy to eliminate the body's weakness to the Yin attribute. High chance of evolving into a new species and achieving excellent or higher grade. Peng can't understand why this creature has 2 evolution routes, but new windows appear listing the requirements for each. For the normal evolution, 5,000 grams of spiritual aura herb, 4,500 grams of concentrated aucuba scent, 10 bottles of first-class antidote, 5 elite-level monster crystals of the wood attribute, 2,500 grams of spirit-calming wood powder, 10 bottles of heart-cleansing dust, and 10 kilograms of tranquil leaf tea. For the distorted yin evolution, 250 grams of black candlegrass, 1 elite-level carrion attribute monster crystal, 2 or 3 pouches of luminous powder, 1 or 2 skull mushrooms, and 3 stalks of withered grass. Peng compares both lists and realizes the normal path demands an absurd number of materials, far exceeding the limit allowed by the examiners. He reasons that his choice makes sense. It's easier to continue painting on a stained canvas than to scrub it clean and start from scratch. So, he decides to take the risk and choose the distorted path. The system updates and displays the yin evolution formula. Mix a portion of black candlegrass into the creature's 3 daily meals for 3 days. Then feed it the carrion-type crystal and place it in a bath containing sulfuric acid solution blended with luminous powder, skull mushrooms, and withered grass. After that, let the process occur naturally. Reading everything carefully, Peng calls Zhou Yuan and hands him a note. Zhou asks if that's the material list, and when he reads it, he's stunned by the names. Black candlegrass, skull mushrooms, withered grass, all toxic ingredients. He frowns and says every one of them is highly poisonous, asking if Peng intends to raise the monkey's grade or kill it. Peng calmly replies that desperate times call for desperate measures, assuring him he knows what he's doing before closing the door. Zhou Yuan storms off, pacing anxiously, muttering that this boy couldn't possibly have gotten a perfect score on the written test. He's just a fool with a bit of theoretical knowledge, acting like a genius. 3 days pass. In room 2, one participant has already failed. In room 7, another candidate also failed, lamenting that the monster's grade almost increased, but she couldn't figure out what went wrong. In room 8, someone else loses it completely, shouting that nothing makes sense. He followed every ratio perfectly, yet nothing worked. Meanwhile, in room 10, the Red River monkey starts to recover. Peng watches, noting that once again the system was right. The black candlegrass stimulated the monkey's body and healed most surface wounds. After 3 days of feeding, its body and spirit are at peak activity, and the carrion crystal has begun to take effect. Peng holds the cage key and says that now all that's left is to put it into the sulfuric acid solution and wait. He remembers Zhou Yuan's warning when handing him the key, that it was meant to open the cage and that all monsters provided by the association were supposedly docile. But after all the suffering the Red River monkey endured, it could react unpredictably, so Peng must be careful. Looking down at the key in his hand, Peng reflects that it's hard for a monster to communicate with a human without a blood contract, and letting it out could be dangerous. But he's already decided. It's the only option he has left. He approaches the cage and speaks gently, saying he's going to release it, but it needs to promise to behave. The monkey nods as if understanding. Without hesitation, Peng unlocks the cage and calls it out. Though he tries to look confident, he still feels a twinge of fear, until the monkey suddenly runs toward him and jumps into his arms, showing gratitude and affection for the kindness it received over the past days. Peng smiles in relief and pets it lightly, saying it can be free now, because the most important thing is helping it evolve. The two walk to the bathroom where the bathtub is ready. Peng tells the monkey to get in, assuring it everything will be fine. But the creature hesitates, pulls out a handful of fur from its tail, and throws it into the tub. The fur sizzles instantly, and frightened, the monkey refuses to enter. Peng is impressed by the creature's intelligence but keeps smiling, urging it to trust him, promising it can become stronger if it has the courage. He then places his hand on the monkey's head, radiating calmness. Slowly, the creature gives in and steps into the tub. Peng watches with a tight chest, saying that sight would make anyone uneasy. The moment the monkey submerges, thick, dark smoke begins to fill the room, startling Peng and triggering the alarms. In the security booth, a voice comes over the radio announcing that the fire alarm has been activated in room 10 and they need to contain it immediately before it spreads. Teams rush in with extinguishers while other participants panic, whispering that whoever's in room 10 must have caused an explosion. From afar, Wang Shu watches with satisfaction, murmuring that the investment wasn't wasted and that manager Li Jin really kept his word. The alarm keeps blaring as people run to room 10 and force the door open, only to find there's no fire, just heavy black smoke drifting through the air. Peng turns startled and asks why they barged in like that. Zhou Yuan explains that the fire alarm had gone off, and as a precaution, everyone rushed to check the situation. The protagonist apologizes, admitting he was so focused on the process that he didn't even notice the system trigger. Zhou grabs the radio and reports that room 10 has been inspected and everything is under control, asking the others to disregard the alert. Moments later, Feng Shu arrives, demanding to know what happened and whether that was truly the result of an evolution process. The details are explained to him, and gradually the tension in the air begins to fade. Meanwhile, bystanders whisper among themselves, saying the whole thing is a mess. After all, that boy is far too young and inexperienced for such a task. Watching from a distance, Wang Shu smirks, saying it looks like not even a piece of the monster remains, meaning he failed the test. Though he plans to watch closely, he wants to see that smug grin vanish for good. Suddenly, the bathtub that had appeared empty begins to bubble, and a skeletal hand bursts out, wrapped in a dark, terrifying aura. The monkey begins to rise, but now with a completely different and horrifying form. People recoil in shock as the creature stands up fully, shattering the tub in front of it. The enormous being glares at the protagonist with hollow, menacing eyes. Feng Xiu demands to know what it is, and Li Jin, equally stunned, asks if that thing could really be the same Red River monkey. Zhou Yuan smiles faintly and says that the kid isn't just a theoretical fool, he's a true genius. The system flashes a notification. Yin distorted evolution completed successfully. The Red River monkey has transformed into a skeletal carrion monkey. Name: Skeletal carrion monkey. Level 11. Tier: Elite. Grade: Perfect. Attribute: Undead. Condition: Weak but animated. Weakness: Light. Peng's face lights up in disbelief. It actually worked. He's overjoyed but mutters that the system is ridiculous. This was only supposed to be a qualification test. In the future, with enough materials, he could evolve and mass-produce creatures like this. Scientists gather around, noting that after the evolution, the creature's body has grown massive, the gas surrounding its bones is incredibly resilient, and the bones themselves look as strong as steel. Li Jin comments, amazed, that this must be an entirely new, uncatalogued species, and more than that, an exceedingly rare undead type, making it a priceless discovery. Feng Xiu smiles, observing that undead types are indeed uncommon, even among the allied government's ranks. But the real treasure isn't the creature. It's the boy who created it. Peng turns around and realizes the chief exterminator is watching. Smiling proudly, he calls out to the examiner, asking him to verify the results. He's successfully evolved the Red River monkey. Feng Xiu smiles and tells him he's done exceptionally well, worthy of the top score on the written test. The now transformed monkey tugs on Peng's clothes, trying to communicate. Peng touches him gently and says he understands. He's already helped him evolve. Shouldn't that be enough? But the creature's eyes show it isn't satisfied. Li Jin, consumed by greed, starts grinning. Evolved monsters are usually handed over as rewards to the association's staff. Normally, he wouldn't care about such things, but this time is different. That new species has to be his. Feng Xiu, seeing the situation, calmly states that it seems the monster has formed a bond with the candidate. And if that's the case, he should be allowed to keep it. Everyone is shocked, even Peng himself. Feng Xiu repeats firmly that Peng may indeed keep the creature. Li Jin, outraged, demands to know if the chief is serious. Feng Xiu replies yes, because this is a new species, and all data about it is unknown. He adds that the evolution was a complete success, making the monster incredibly valuable, then asks what Peng intends to do with it. Peng pauses, recalling the examiner's earlier words about advancement. But what truly amazes him is something else. Before, the monkey had only been at normal grade and could only reach elite tier upon hitting level 20. Yet it has now achieved elite tier at level 11, skipping the excellent grade entirely and jumping straight to perfect. Even more astonishing, the system indicates it could still evolve further to the epic grade, and it's already an extremely rare undead type. Zhou Yuan approaches, stunned, saying no one could have guessed that creature was once a Red River monkey, and points out that it clearly wants to stay with Peng, so he should take it with him. Li Jin interrupts, raising his voice and turning to Feng Xiu, insisting that can't be allowed. According to association rules, monsters that successfully evolve during evaluations must be handed over to the institution. He also argues that the Red River monkey underwent numerous experiments and only evolved because of them. Wang Shu seizes the moment, siding with Li Jin, saying the monster should have been destroyed long ago, mocking Peng for being so young and claiming it's impossible someone like him could improve a dying creature. Li Jin insists it's absurd to let him keep it. A novice like that doesn't deserve such a thing. Wang Shu reinforces the claim, saying Peng had no merit in any of it. The president then asks sharply how exactly the boy could have cheated. Realizing Feng Xiu's irritation, Li Jin tries to soften his tone, saying maybe Peng didn't cheat, but the test's difficulty far exceeds what a junior breeder could handle. He claims Peng probably just got lucky healing and evolving the monster, which means the test can't accurately measure his real ability. Feng Xiu replies with biting irony, is Li Jin suggesting that Peng took a dying monster, evolved it by accident, discovered a new species, and that still doesn't count as a valid result? Li Jin quickly backtracks, saying not exactly. He admits the test result stands, since the boy did evolve the creature, even if by luck, and the certificate should be issued to preserve fairness. However, the evolved monster must remain under the association's ownership. Feng Shu laughs out loud, saying this is what comes from narrow-mindedness. It's shameful to see such petty thinking. He remarks that there are few talented breeders in the city precisely because their minds are trapped like frogs at the bottom of a well. Turning to Peng, he asks if the boy would mind showing those two how vast the world truly is. Peng takes a deep breath and replies that all he wants is his breeder certificate. He has no idea how he got dragged into such a mess. Then, looking directly at Wang Shu, he calls him old man, asking if he really thinks this was cheating just because he's young, concluding that such thinking belongs to a real idiot. He then points at Li Jin and says that just because he can't do something doesn't mean no one else can, asking sarcastically if the man is blind and didn't just see what happened. Peng goes on, calling them incompetent and ignorant for refusing to accept the truth, staring them in the face, clinging instead to excuses to justify their disbelief. Seeing people like that, he says, is truly pitiful. He then explains that although the name Red River Monkey includes the word river, its attribute has nothing to do with water. The name simply refers to the area where the species is found. But at some point, someone assumed it was aligned with water and yin because of that word. And that person, he says, was a complete fool. Judging by the monkey's condition, plenty of other fools believed the same thing since they had flooded it with materials of those types. They were all blind to the fact that the creature's true weakness was yin. Not knowing something that basic, he says, means they've wasted their lives. Wang Shu angrily protests that this is nonsense. Everyone knows the Red River Monkey's weakness is wood. Feng Xue interrupts, clarifying that while the creature does have some connection to wood, its true weakness is yin, and adds that Wang Shu will lose points for not knowing it. Peng continues, explaining that because of the monkey's strong vitality, it survived even after yin energy had invaded deep into its bone marrow, but purifying it would be nearly impossible. That's why he chose the opposite approach. Over the last 3 days, he fed it black candlegrass to strengthen its spirit and, using yin as a foundation, added undead-type materials, along with an elite tier crystal of the same attribute. While it might sound simple, he stresses that he didn't just mix them randomly. The real key lies in the order and ratio of the materials. Without that understanding, any attempt would have failed completely. Furthermore, anyone who tries without understanding the process could cause unpredictable results. And if the Red River monkeys were to go extinct because of that, he wouldn't be able to bear such responsibility. Feng Shu begins clapping, praising the brilliance of the new generation, and declares that since Peng has demonstrated such remarkable talent, it would be a waste to grant him only a junior breeder certificate. Therefore, the president personally guarantees that the protagonist will receive the official monster breeder certificate. Feng Shu adds that, unfortunately, issuing an advanced level certificate is beyond his authority. But if Peng travels to the main headquarters in Yanjing and undergoes a new evaluation, he's certain that with the talent Peng has shown, he will undoubtedly achieve that level, as long as he keeps working hard. Peng bows deeply, expressing heartfelt gratitude for everything. The president then rises, faces the two men still standing frozen, and returns to the subject of cheating. He demands to know who the real cheaters are and asks if they think he's too foolish to uncover their schemes. He reminds them that someone just admitted the Red River monkey was an experimental subject meant for disposal. Feng Xiu says he too would like to know why a failed experiment, scheduled for elimination, was assigned to a test chamber in the first place. Zhang Hong confirms she already suspected Wang Shu's comments, and the other candidates start speaking up, saying Manager Li was clearly involved and that Peng was their real target. Zhou Yuan raises his hand and states that he can testify, revealing that Manager Li Jin personally added the Red River monkey to the exam's monster list, even though there were many healthier options available. Li Jin tries to silence him, but Zhou continues, pointing at Wang Shu and explaining that Li acted under the candidate's direct orders. He adds that proof of this is recorded in the association's official monster allocation reports, and a quick investigation would verify it. Wang Shu collapses to the floor in panic, desperately denying everything. The president then declares that based on the evidence as head of the Chang'an City Monster Breeder Association, he officially announces that candidate Wang Shu cheated and is hereby disqualified from the current evaluation, banned from participating in any future exams for the next 3 years. He continues, stating that former manager Li Jin is permanently expelled from the association and will never be reinstated. The surrounding crowd erupts in cheers, saying justice has been served. Feng Shu turns back to Peng, admitting that what happened was disgraceful, apologizing and inviting him for a cup of tea in his office, not only to apologize but also to make a special request. Sometime later, Peng now holds his intermediate breeder certificate in hand and has named his skeletal carrion monkey Dumby, meaning idiot. Because the creature often stares blankly into space when left alone. Looking at his new certificate, Peng jokes that he heard it's worth 30 bonus points on the college entrance exam. He boards a bus with a smile, thinking how incredible the whole evaluation had been. Not only did he obtain a perfect grade monster, but also an intermediate certificate and an identity card for Dumby. He remembers that the association usually takes ages with such paperwork, but everything changed after befriending the president. Yet, just minutes earlier, inside the association office, Feng Shu had told Peng he wanted to invite him to represent the city in the World Monster Breeder Competition. The protagonist asks if he's serious, and Feng Shu confirms firmly. He explains that, as he said before, the top breeders in the city are mediocre, which is why they've never achieved strong results in major tournaments. But if Peng represents Chang'an, everything could change. Feng Shu emphasizes that the world has only been different for 3 years, meaning both old and young stand on equal ground. Thus, the World Monster Breeder Competition has no age limit. The president, now excited, slaps the desk and exclaims that in terms of potential, young talents like Peng have an overwhelming advantage. Peng tries to hide his growing interest, but his expression betrays him, and Feng Shu teases that it would be a shame for him to refuse, especially since the top competitors receive large cash prizes, with the top 10 earning at least 10,000 alliance credits each. Feng Shu then looks aside, slightly embarrassed, admitting that he was selfish for wanting Peng to join so suddenly and that he'll take full responsibility for it. But Peng interrupts him, telling him not to say another word. With a determined expression, he declares that with great power comes great responsibility, and for that reason, he'll accept the invitation to protect the city's honor. Back in the present, on the bus, Peng sits deep in thought, wondering whether he should really enter such a competition, as everything seems complicated. Around him, passengers whisper in awe at his familiar, marveling that it's such a rare undead creature. But as always, there's someone foolish enough to do something stupid. One man leans closer out of curiosity and loudly asks what would happen if he pulled a bone from the monster. Without thinking, he reaches out to try. In an instant, red threads shoot out from Dumby, wrapping tightly around the man's arm. Within seconds, the undead completely restrains him without even turning his head, while Peng, lost in thought, is still daydreaming about the 10,000 credit reward for placing among the world's top 10. After all, someone poor like him can't afford to ignore that kind of opportunity. Dumby rises and stares at the man who dared to touch him, raising a hand toward his eye, ready to strike. Peng quickly calls his name, and the undead instantly releases the man, returning obediently to his master's side. Peng sighs, muttering that with both him and Dazi around, he has no choice but to join the competition. After all, Dazi eats too much, and now, with Dumby's size, feeding them both will be tough. Smiling, Peng jokes to his new familiar not to worry. It's his own fault for being such a genius, so young and talented that even the heavens must be jealous. The passengers keep whispering, amazed that the boy hasn't even signed a formal contract yet and still commands absolute obedience from the creature. Many wonder who this mysterious prodigy is that no one in the city had ever heard of before. After getting off the bus, Peng says it'll be good to talk to Tang Tang and tell her everything that happened. Suddenly, something rushes toward him. Dumby senses the danger and pushes him aside, blocking the attack. The undead looks back concerned, checking if his master is unharmed. Peng gets up, wincing from the pain in his back, and asks why Dumby pushed him so suddenly. The creature remains in a defensive stance, guarding him, until Peng realizes what happened and smiles, saying he was just worried. He walks up to him and says there's no need to worry. From now on, they're all family. When he turns toward Dazi, Peng is shocked at how much the centipede has fattened up. Just then, Tang Tang appears, waving and saying that she and Dazi came to pick him up. Peng asks what happened, and she smiles, explaining that Dazi is much healthier and stronger now because she fed him very well. The system automatically analyzes and reports that Dazi is severely overfed, making Peng suspicious as he questions whether he's really stronger and healthier. Tang Tang replies cheerfully that he is, saying he was too skinny before and that she gave him something highly nutritious to eat. Dumby glances at Dazi's huge belly and starts flexing, showing off his own muscular frame. Tang Tang laughs and tells him not to get caught up in such details, changing the subject by saying what really matters is how Peng did on his exam. The protagonist explains that it went very well. The monster he received had undergone many experiments, and he managed to improve its grade, earning an intermediate monster breeder certificate. Afterward, the association president gave him a new monster as a gift, in gratitude for saving and perfecting the other one during the test. Peng points to Dumby and says he accepted him out of respect for the president. Tang Tang looks surprised and asks if he really obtained an intermediate certificate. He confirms, showing the document, and she smiles, impressed, saying he's grown up so fast and truly amazed her. Peng notices her expression soften slightly, her gaze now warmer and more curious. Tang Tang says she wanted to discuss this later but decides to ask now. Does he know why monster trainers hold such a high status? She says she'll be direct. No matter how powerful familiars are, they're still external forces, and a single shooter or bullet can easily kill them, since humans themselves are fragile. Peng looks shocked and asks if that means the high status comes from the trainers having their own means of protection. Tang Tang smiles and replies, exactly, then asks if he'd like to learn how. The secret technique Constellation Shift was, in fact, a powerful damage transfer ability that allowed its user to completely redirect any wound they received to their own familiar. However, its range was limited, and it could only be activated with the familiar's conscious consent. Despite that limitation, the potential of the technique was immense, since a monster's vitality and endurance far surpassed those of a human and continued to grow as the monster evolved. That meant that, over time, the technique would become increasingly useful and efficient. After fully understanding how it worked, the creator and his familiar began to feel a subtle bond, as if connected by an invisible thread. After some time meditating, the protagonist stretched and commented with satisfaction that he seemed to have successfully learned the technique. He thought to himself that for Tang Tang to grant him something so valuable, her support surely wasn't simple. Looking at Dazi, he joked that the creature had gotten too fat, looking like an obese purple pig. Dazi was indignant, but Peng asked Dumby to bring a mirror and showed him the truth. Seeing his reflection, Dazi was shocked, almost falling into depression. The protagonist then scolded him, telling him to stop pretending to be dead and get up to start exercising. After all, by losing all that fat, he could increase his rank. Even so, Peng thought that if his familiar stayed that fat, it would really be a problem. After all, who would want a fat flying centipede? The next day, in the city center, Tang Tang and Peng met. He apologized for making her wait so long, but she smiled and said it didn't matter, since he had already become an intermediate monster creator and still agreed to help her with her small studio. So waiting a bit wasn't a problem at all. He felt a little embarrassed, and she joked that she would stop teasing him, asking him to come in because she needed to explain more about the studio. She told him that some time ago she had partnered with others to open a small monster creator studio and invested a lot of money in it. But her partners had fled with both the money and all the creators who worked there. Peng commented that the studio was located in an excellent area, right in the heart of the city, and the rent must be sky high. Tang Tang laughed awkwardly, trying to hide her discomfort, saying that the business had been going very well before the betrayal, which was why they had rented that place. But after the creators were taken away, things collapsed. The protagonist began to feel that something was off and wondered if it was just his imagination or if she was acting differently that day. Tang Tang called him and asked him to follow her upstairs, explaining that the studio was on the third floor. She emphasized that, regarding payment, as she had said before, he would receive the best salary possible for the position, and even 20% of the shares. She added that he didn't need to worry as the job wouldn't interfere with his studies. He only needed to come on weekends, since the work of a monster creator was relatively easy. Peng, surprised, asked if that salary wasn't too high, since with such an offer she could attract much more experienced creators. Tang Tang replied casually that it wasn't as good as it sounded, explaining that she didn't want to draw too much attention. Even so, the protagonist remained suspicious. After all, first she had given him a secret technique, then invited him to a store in the very center of the city, and now offered such a generous deal. If it weren't for the trust between them, anyone would say it was too suspicious to be coincidence. But since it was Tang Tang, Peng saw no problem. After all, she had secretly taken care of him for the past 3 years, ever since the day he became an orphan. Holding his bag tightly, he took a deep breath, trying to drive away unnecessary thoughts. He knew Tang Tang would never harm him, no matter how generous her offer seemed. And in the end, with the help of his system, he really was worth all that. Maybe even more. If he could help her profit from it, it was a fair exchange. So he said he accepted all the terms, and that from that moment on, she was in charge. Tang Tang smiled, satisfied, wishing for good cooperation between them, though inwardly she sighed in relief. That had been harder than she expected, and thankfully he hadn't suspected anything. Shortly after, they reached the third floor. A young woman with a gentle and cute appearance ran toward them, smiling, saying that Miss Tang Tang had arrived just in time. Tang Tang then introduced the protagonist, saying his name was Peng and that he was the monster creator she had just hired. Then she introduced the young woman, explaining that she was the studio's receptionist, and her name was Shun Quan Quan. Right after that, Tang Tang returned to the elevator and told Peng that she had already explained everything to Quan Quan, who would be responsible for showing him the studio and introducing him to his colleagues. She added that she needed to leave because she still had a lot of work to do. Without giving him a chance to say anything else, she simply said goodbye and left, leaving the two of them there. Peng ran a hand through his hair, chuckling softly since he had already guessed she would do that. Even so, he murmured, wondering if she was really okay. Quan Quan kept her charming smile and asked him to follow her, saying they would handle his registration. While filling out the information, she glanced at Peng discreetly, surprised that someone so young was already an intermediate monster creator. Deep down, she thought Tang Tang had probably been deceived. Meanwhile, Peng sat reflecting on how the studio operated. If he wanted to generate profit for Tang Tang, he would need to set a fair service rate. Unlike other creators, he had the system, and following its instructions, his creation success rate would be practically 100%. Therefore, it wouldn't be fair to charge the same as everyone else. Although he wasn't obsessed with money, charging less would be a waste, and in a way, even disrespectful to the system itself. So he decided to charge 3 times the maximum price normally asked by an intermediate creator. When the registration was complete, Quan Quan approached him and handed over the certificate, saying the process was finished. Peng thanked her, but the receptionist looked at him with slight concern and asked if he really intended to charge 3 times the maximum rate. She explained that maybe he didn't know how a studio worked, but warned that such a price could hurt their reputation. Peng frowned and asked what she meant by that. At that moment, the door suddenly burst open. A man rushed in, looking irritated and desperate, saying he would get straight to the point. He stared at Peng and declared that if Peng wanted to charge 3 times the maximum rate, he would have to prove he was worth the price. Stepping forward firmly, he stated that if Peng could heal his familiar, no matter how long it took, he would pay 10 times the requested amount. He repeated with conviction that if his familiar truly recovered and advanced in rank, he would pay 10 times the fee without hesitation. Quan Quan panicked the moment she heard the offer since that amount was absurdly high, and she desperately begged the man to calm down. Peng, however, remained calm and confident, saying it was fine. He remarked that this would be his first client and that, for that reason, he would give a generous discount, charging only 3 times the normal rate, not 10. The man looked at him in surprise and asked if he was really that confident in being able to heal his familiar. Peng asked him to calm down, explaining that he could only give an accurate answer after examining the creature's condition. The man then opened a box and with a worried expression revealed his small familiar. Quan Quan stepped closer anxiously as the animal began whimpering in pain and trembling in its owner's hands. The man looked at Peng in despair, asking if he could do anything. The system immediately activated the analysis. Purple electric rat, conflicting variant, level 19, elite tier, excellent grade, lightning attribute, condition, minor injuries and weakness due to mud contamination, promotion requirements for perfect grade, incomplete. Moments later, a red warning flashed across the system panel. Danger detected. Resolve the conflicting variation immediately. Peng widened his eyes and, unable to contain his irritation, shouted at the client asking what he had fed the rat. The man, startled, replied that he had given it blood jade ganoderma, thinking it would trigger a mutation and help it evolve, but the result had been the opposite. Now, desperate, he asked if there was still a chance to cure it. Peng began reasoning. The electric rat had already been in the process of evolution, but the forced attempt caused a conflicting variation between the lightning and blood types, leading to the collapse. The system reappeared, displaying the variant evolution plan. 5 shadow fruits, 5 grams of scarlet maple from the well, 50 grams of golden lightning leaves, grind and boil into soup. Add 1 bloodbat crystal core, elite tier. Peng realized that if he followed the system's plan, he could turn the conflict into a complement and trigger a unique variant evolution. He then asked Quan Quan to gather the ingredients as quickly as possible and turned to the client, asking if he knew the creator's rules. They used their own materials, but the client had to reimburse everything afterward. The man agreed immediately, so willing to pay whatever it took. Peng approached the small rat and spoke to it calmly, promising that he would make it evolve successfully. Once everything was ready, they went to the treatment room. When the preparation began, both the client and Quan Quan were horrified by what they saw. The man, pale as a sheet, asked if that was really how Peng intended to heal the electric rat. The scene was absurd. The little rat was lying on a chopping board, and Peng, holding a huge cleaver, looked as if he were about to slice it up. Seeing that, both of them shouted in disbelief, calling it madness. But Peng, unfazed, grabbed the rat and threw it straight into the boiling pot. The client tried to stop him, and Quan Quan nearly fainted, crying that this would cause a massive loss. Even so, Peng continued stirring the pot calmly, and after a few seconds he lifted a ladle of the broth and, with the most serious expression in the world, asked if the client would like to taste a sip of the rat soup, claiming that, according to legend, it nourished the yin and restored the yang. The man began to panic, but Peng simply smiled and told him to relax, explaining that it was just a joke to lighten the mood. Then he lifted the lid and asked the man to take a look. Mr. Ma leaned in curiously, and to his astonishment, What was inside wasn't soup at all. It was a medicinal bath Peng had prepared for the familiar. The heat was only meant to help the creature absorb the medicine more effectively. Even so, the client kept watching with his heart pounding, trying to stay calm. The protagonist covered the pot again and with a confident smile said that the heavens were about to bless that rat, so it needed to boil a little longer, about 10 more minutes. Mr. Ma thought about how there were only two advanced monster creators in the whole city, both prestigious and impossible to schedule. That was why his only option had been Peng, an intermediate creator. But if the boy made a mistake, he wouldn't forgive it. 10 minutes later, the client returned to the room and asked if it wasn't done yet or if it was taking too long. Peng calmly replied that it was almost time. Suddenly, the pot began to shake and rumble, and Peng announced that the moment had come. The lid flew off, a small explosion burst out, and the rat leaped from the pot, trembling and radiating energy throughout its body. In an instant, it destroyed everything around it with incredible speed. The client began shouting with joy, celebrating that it had worked, and that his familiar had truly evolved. Quan Quan, however, panicked as she watched the treatment room being completely destroyed. The system analyzed the monster again and displayed Name, Purple Blood Electric Rat, Level 20, Tier, Elite, Grade, Perfect, Attributes, Lightning, and Blood. Peng crossed his arms and remarked that the client was very lucky. His familiar had reached perfect grade with dual attributes, and with a bit of training, it could even advance to Commander Tier. Mr. Ma, overwhelmed with emotion, apologized for having been rude earlier and thanked him sincerely. Peng replied professionally, saying there was no need for thanks since the man was paying for the service. He then handed him the invoice, including the consultation fee and materials, and the cost of the damage to the treatment room. He called Quan Quan Cutie and asked her to send the list of materials to the client's home, explaining that the cost would be deducted from his commission. Mr. Ma, still excited by the result, asked if Peng could examine another of his familiars and whether he had time the next day. However, Peng refused. The man insisted, saying he would pay 3 times more since money wasn't a problem. Peng then asked him to calm down and explained that wasn't the reason. He simply had school the next day and wouldn't have time. The client was confused and asked if it was some kind of association training or a lesson with a renowned master. Peng packed his things and, with complete composure, said that he was still in his 3rd year of high school and needed to go home to do his homework. Mr. Ma was left completely stunned, unable to believe that someone so young could possess such talent, muttering to himself that students these days were terrifying. Quan Quan was also speechless, remembering that Tang Tang had bought the studio just a few days earlier for an enormous sum, fired all the previous monster creators, and told her to keep it a secret from Peng. But now, seeing this, she understood that he was a true super genius. Meanwhile, inside her home, Tang Tang held something in her hands and commented that it was the last remaining crystal core. She ordered her familiar to deliver it to the right destination. An open window led in the wind, and in the protagonist's room, Dazi rested peacefully. Tang Tang's small familiar threw the crystal core through the window, and both it and the other creature watched the scene unfold. Dazi quickly darted forward, swallowed the core, and within seconds began to feel something strange. Dumby, alarmed, tried to help him. Meanwhile, Peng was walking home calmly, mumbling that those 7 kilos of yin cedar needles should be enough to feed Dumby for a month. He reflected that his familiar had already reached perfect grade, and if it continued evolving, it could reach epic grade, something so rare he had only read about it in books or seen on TV. Even so, he decided it would be better to ensure proper nutrition before thinking about new evolutions. On the other hand, Dazi's case was more urgent. To evolve, he needed a crystal core from a level 10 or higher thunder-type monster, an extremely hard-to-find item, and even if he found one, he probably couldn't afford it. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from his house. Peng froze, recognizing Dumby's cry, and realized something might have happened. He ran frantically, knocking things over on the way until he reached the door. When he opened it, he saw Dazi rolling around wrapped in an unstable aura. The system immediately ran an auto-analysis. Yellow-clawed, purple-backed centipede. In evolution. Current grade, normal. Level 8. A large amount of Thunder Titan centipede meat has been consumed along with a Thunder Titan centipede crystal core. Condition. Requirements met for one of the evolutionary paths. Evolution initiated. Peng's eyes widened. He didn't know whether to be amazed or terrified. He shouted, demanding to know what kind of evolution this was and where such a rare crystal core had come from. When he turned around, he noticed Tang Tang watching from a distance. He called out to her, angrily asking if she had given Dazi the core. She tried to play it off, avoiding his gaze, but thought that if she had told him, he surely would have refused. Changing the subject, she pretended to act natural and said she had only come to drop off his groceries since he'd left them halfway home. Before Peng could respond, she hurried off. grumbling that he'd been spending too freely since he started making money. Peng tried calling her again, but she told him to rest and promised not to bother him anymore before slipping into her own apartment. He sighed, realizing she obviously knew he needed that core and had done it on purpose. Turning back to Dazi, he gave his familiar a light tap on the head, scolding him for being such a glutton and eating whatever he found. Sitting down beside him, he opened the system and remarked that it didn't matter anymore. What really mattered now was finding a way to accelerate the evolution. He rummaged through the clutter in the room, muttering that nothing there would work until he found something interesting, a purple poisonous flower. Holding it up, he said that if he ground it and mixed it into a medicinal broth, it might help with the evolution. He quickly prepared the elixir, handed it to Dazi, and told him to drink it at once. The little monster swallowed the liquid and suddenly, its eyes gleamed brightly. A powerful surge of energy burst from its body, lighting up the entire apartment and shattering the windows. The transformation began instantly. Dazi's body grew larger, his claws and shell became tougher, and amid the blinding light, he successfully completed his evolution. The system analyzed again and reported that Dazi had now become a purple-backed thunder centipede, level 9, excellent grade, with thunder and poison attributes. To reach perfect grade, he would need to grind a silver leaf into powder, mix it with water, and make Dazi drink it daily for a week, as well as provide a crystal core from a commander-level thunder-type monster. Peng sighed in relief, saying it was finally over. He hadn't expected Dazi to advance to excellent grade so easily, and remarked that this was the benefit of having someone amazing backing him up. Suddenly, Dazi collapsed from exhaustion and Dumby rushed over in concern, checking if his friend was okay. The protagonist was surprised since Dazi usually picked on Dumby, yet he was showing genuine worry. Peng reassured him, saying Dazi was just tired. Then he offered Dumby some food, telling him that despite his looks he was very kind, and that's why Peng had bought that meal especially for him. Dumby took a piece carefully, tasted the delicious flavor, and soon began eating eagerly. Peng smiled in satisfaction and told him he was a good boy, asking him to just keep eating. He added that Dumby had gone through a recent evolution, so it was best to let him stabilize for now. And later, once they gathered the right materials, they would work on helping him evolve again since he would certainly become a very powerful familiar. Sometime later, Dazi woke up and saw that both Peng and Dumby were asleep. An idea crossed his mind. He grabbed a blanket and quietly walked toward his master. Tang Tung, watching everything through the window, commented that it looked like the calm before the storm. Seeing how surrounded by affection the protagonist was, she said that he needed to grow stronger as quickly as possible. The next day, inside the principal's office, the man slammed his hand on the desk and shouted that he completely rejected the proposal. He demanded to know how they could even consider allowing monsters into the school, given that the students were still young and defenseless, asking if the higher-ups weren't concerned about their safety. Another man tried to calm him down, explaining that in times of peace, such an age might still be considered childish. But in ancient times, people that young were already taking up arms to protect their families. The principal was shocked, asking if things had truly come to that point, and the superior replied that, although new technologies were being developed all around the world, progress was still slow. And if things continued like this, when the day came that their current technology could no longer face the threats ahead, it would already be too late for regret. Meanwhile, in the classroom, Peng felt uneasy as everyone stared at him. One of the students turned around and asked if it was true that he had earned an intermediate creator's certificate. Peng asked how he knew about that, and the boy showed him a newspaper, revealing that he had become famous, a real celebrity, which made their class seem even more impressive. He added that the news had also deflated Zigong's pride, who had been unbearable ever since learning that his mother had passed her exam too. The group then said they had a somewhat bad favor to ask, but Peng cut them off, saying that if they themselves already considered it a bad request, then there was no reason to make it at all, as it would be unpleasant both for the one asking and the one doing it. In other words, it wasn't a good idea to insist on bad favors. The boy frowned in irritation, but before he could reply, their teacher suddenly appeared behind him and smacked him on the head with a stack of papers, shouting to know why everyone was just standing around. She then ordered everyone to sit down immediately because she had an important announcement to make. Mudong walked to the front of the classroom and explained that, starting that day, all schools around the world were undergoing an emergency reform. The second year of high school would now include a new course about monsters, along with a special recruitment channel. It was a joint project between the Ministry of Education and the military, and the top students could be directly recruited into prestigious academies or military institutions. She informed them that military instructors would arrive soon and that any students interested in joining those academies could begin training that very afternoon. Mudong added that anyone who wished to become a special student should meet her after class to register. The entire class was stunned by the sudden announcement, whispering among themselves that such a direct collaboration with the military wasn't normal, raising suspicions that something serious might be happening, perhaps even outside the city, since they had heard rumors that the situation out there was tense. While the students murmured, the teacher called Peng and asked him to follow her because she wanted to speak privately. Outside the classroom, Murong smiled and praised him, saying he had done something truly amazing by obtaining the Intermediate Monster Creator Certificate, and that even the principal had personally congratulated him in the earlier meeting. Then she revealed that the following day, the high school students from the 7th school would be visiting, and the school wanted him to serve as the representative for the new students. Peng tried to refuse, saying that sort of thing was too showy and not really his style, since what he truly wanted was to become a special student and a monster trainer. Murong grew curious and asked why he had made that decision, acknowledging that being a trainer was admirable, but that she didn't quite understand his urgency. Suddenly, noises came from outside and she noticed that the army had already arrived at the school. She then remarked that his grades were excellent and, combined with the bonus from his creator certificate, he had enough points to get into the best universities in the world. For that reason, she told him that he could choose any academy inside or outside of China, and that he had full control over his future. She further explained that if he truly wished to become a monster trainer, he could use his current achievements to enter a military academy and specialize there. There was no need to rush. Outside, soldiers were already unloading various monsters for the afternoon training sessions. Peng watched the movement outside through the window and sincerely thanked his teacher for her words, saying that he understood her concern but believed the military path was the safest place to start. However, he emphasized that the process was too slow and that he wanted to learn real combat techniques and grow stronger as soon as possible, something that would only be possible if he passed both exams at the same time. For that reason, he couldn't afford to miss the opportunity. He asked Murong not to worry about him. The teacher sighed, saying he was still young, but upon seeing the determination in his eyes, she eventually gave in. She said that if that was truly what he wanted, she wouldn't stop him, but warned him not to act recklessly. Peng bowed respectfully and thanked her for her support before heading on his way. Groups of students were gathering for training, filled with excitement and confidence. After all, it was an incredible opportunity and everyone wanted to give their best. Suddenly, someone in the crowd called out to him, asking if he had also registered as a monster trainer. When he turned to see who it was, he recognized Qianjin. The boy ran up to him enthusiastically, saying that he was already a monster creator and that his grades were excellent too. Curious, Peng asked why he wanted to register. With bright eyes, Qianjin replied that it was his childhood dream. His favorite animated movie had been God's favorite treasure, and the monsters in it were amazing. That's why he wanted to become one with the strongest trainer and couldn't miss the chance. Peng teased him, asking if that strongest trainer happened to be a man, would he still want to become one with him? Annoyed, Qianjin said it was just a figure of speech. Peng ended the teasing and told him it was fine, but they needed to keep moving, since the training field was just ahead. When the group of students arrived, they were stunned by the sight of the muscular soldiers. It was the first time they had ever seen people so imposing and serious. The colonel stepped onto the stage and Qianjin whispered if that man was really the instructor, since, aside from his muscles, he didn't seem that special. The colonel heard the remark and, with a single glare, made Qianjin almost faint from fear. Peng observed and thought that murderous aura was terrifying, realizing the colonel was anything but ordinary. The man began to speak, first praising them for having courage, unlike those who had given up. But then he broke the atmosphere, saying that courage alone was worthless. Without a steady mind and iron will, they would wet themselves the moment they saw a wild monster, their legs turning to jelly. They wouldn't even be able to run. The students grew irritated and shouted that it wasn't true, that they wanted to become monster trainers and had already seen many monsters before. The colonel smiled and asked if they were really that sure, then ordered that a wild beast be brought in. The monster was dragged in and placed beside a thick metal plate. A soldier explained that the target was a Type 3 armored plate, 10 centimeters thick. The colonel gave the order and the beast charged at a frightening speed, completely shattering the plate with a single blow. The students stood speechless and terrified at the display of power. Even Peng was shocked, wondering how something so thick could be destroyed so easily. The colonel asked if they had all seen that, explaining that this was the power of a trained familiar, and that the monsters they would face in the future could be even stronger. He then said this was their last chance. Anyone who wanted to quit could leave right now. People started walking away and Peng was surprised to see that almost everyone left. Apparently, they had only come for the excitement of the moment. The colonel shouted, asking why they looked so down, saying that what they had done wasn't wrong. He smiled and told them that those who went back should study hard because Studying was also a fine path, and they weren't deserters. They had simply made the rational choice to return to class. The colonel then turned his gaze to those who remained, his eyes wild and his aura so heavy that everyone felt the air grow thick. He said that those who chose to stay were different, but warned that if anyone quit now, they would be true deserters. And he hated deserters more than anything. He asked if they understood, and with trembling voices, the students answered yes. The colonel yelled for them to repeat, saying he couldn't hear them. The group, terrified, screamed in unison that they understood. By the end of the day, Peng arrived home and collapsed on the couch, completely exhausted. Even though he had prepared himself mentally, he hadn't expected it to be that tough. Despite his fatigue, he noticed his familiars were upset and hungry, so he went to the kitchen. As he walked, he recalled Colonel Chen's words. Within a month, every institute in the city would conduct elimination tests until only about 1,200 students remained. The cut rate was brutally high. When Peng opened the refrigerator and found it empty, he began rummaging through the cupboards, wondering aloud where all the yin cedar needles had gone. Only one remained. He walked into the living room confused and asked what had happened. Dazi pointed at Dumby, saying he had eaten everything. Peng approached and calmly explained that next time, if Dumby wanted more, he just needed to ask. Dumby lowered his head embarrassed, and Peng patted him gently, saying he wasn't angry. He just wanted him to let him know. Then he sat on the couch and opened the system, checking the data. Dumby needed to absorb 250 kilos of yin cedar needles to complete the first stage, meaning he was almost there. Peng placed an order for 15 kilos of needles and 5 kilos of thunderflower fruit. Calculating the costs, he thought to himself that half a kilo of needles cost 1,000 alliance dollars, but only 1.5 credits for 10 kilos, affordable for daily use. Even so, the faster Dumby ate, the faster he would evolve, which meant the materials would become increasingly expensive and rare, perhaps even requiring a legendary crystal, which would be like burning money. And then there was Dazi, the glutton, who needed 100 kilos of thunderflower fruit to reach perfect grade. Fortunately, those fruits were cheaper. Half a kilo cost only 100 alliance dollars. After finishing the calculations, Peng held his head and murmured that supporting a family really wasn't easy. The next day, upon arriving at school, he was stunned by the sight before him. The place looked like a true monster park. Students and creatures everywhere, even a colossal body occupying half the courtyard. Peng approached a girl and asked if that was her familiar, complimenting how healthy it looked, but telling her she'd need to make some space. Confused, the girl asked what he meant, and he explained that her monster was completely blocking the gate. The girl made a desperate face, remembering that she had bought it when it was small and cute, but it had grown out of control. She pouted, almost crying, saying it wasn't like that when she bought it. Peng sighed and asked if she really didn't understand what he had just said. At that moment, a soldier appeared asking what was going on, and if her familiar was indeed blocking the path. With a grin, the man turned toward Silver and said, the monster was his now. The wolf growled, releasing a fierce aura, and the giant pig began to tremble in fear until it finally stood up, clearing the way. The soldier commented that it looked like the show was over and that they could now begin real training. Everyone gathered in the training field, and he explained that he knew some wished they had formed more familiars to build a complete squad, but that today's focus would be on their own combat abilities. Even though this was a basic step, it was essential, because no matter how powerful familiars were, if they didn't listen and obey commands, they were useless. And everyone had just seen a clear example of that. The girl with the pig looked visibly embarrassed. The officer crouched down and told them that if they wanted to train their familiars, they first needed to understand their habits and preferences to build a proper bond. As an example, he mentioned his own silver moon wolf, explaining that he always bought the armored black pork it loved and fed it personally. He even joked and slept beside it every day. Thanks to that, the wolf now trusted him completely and obeyed every order. Everyone recalled how the colonel's familiar had shattered a steel plate with just its tail. But the soldier explained that originally the tail hadn't even been the wolf's strongest weapon. It was only after months and months of training that it became tougher, faster, and more precise, turning into an additional attack method alongside its fangs and claws. That was the colonel's training style, developing multiple forms of attack. Next, Li was called to demonstrate his own familiar's abilities. He explained that his was also a silver moon wolf, like many others, but due to a different training method, it had evolved differently. Throwing a rock forward, the wolf dashed at lightning speed and shattered it completely with a single bite. Peng was impressed by the power of that strike. The officer then continued, saying that familiars were divided into 5 classes: attack, defense, support, healing, and control. However, it wasn't uncommon to train a familiar for more than one role. For example, the green demon vine could be used for both defense and control. Finally, he clapped his hands and said that the basics had been covered, so the official training would begin. The first exercises were simple. Start by testing bite strength on wooden blocks and gradually increase the difficulty. While a group of monkeys unloaded a truck, the soldier explained that all those materials were for the students to use during training, so they didn't need to worry about resources. He emphasized that anyone who had already chosen their training style should register and collect the appropriate supplies. The protagonist began thinking about the best way to train Dazi. Since he was strong in offense, perhaps the ideal would be to strengthen his defense. However, he had no idea how to begin training that aspect. Peng, on the other hand, watched the small monkeys curiously as they carried enormous crates and concluded that they had likely specialized in physical strength. Suddenly, he remembered seeing a file at the studio about a species of mutant monkeys with sparse hair known as boxing monkeys. They were incredible attackers but extremely weak defensively. According to the document, these monkeys were trained by their own parents from birth, going through a harsh process where they repeatedly struck their bodies against tree trunks, then against piles of stone, facing tougher challenges as they grew. Over time, their constantly wounded skin dried and hardened, forming a natural armor of calluses and scars. As adults, they developed powerful muscles and a tough hide, capable of protecting them even from heavy impacts against rock. Inspired, the protagonist studied the training materials and thought he might adopt a similar method to improve Dazi's defense. After selecting the equipment, he walked over to his familiar, who was lazily lying in the shade of a tree. Calling him over, Peng said he had chosen their new training method, explaining that it was for Dazi's own good. Better to feel a bit of pain now than suffer for life. Holding something in his hand, he assured him it would only hurt a little, and smiled as he raised a hammer, saying that Dazi just needed to trust him because it wouldn't be that bad. Terrified, Dazi started trembling and bolted in panic. The protagonist ran after him, shouting that he didn't need to run, that it wouldn't hurt, and that it was all for his own good, insisting that it hurt him emotionally too. When he finally caught up, he sighed, complaining that the hammer was so heavy it had nearly broken his own arm. A week later, at 7 in the morning, the alarm went off. Peng turned it off and rolled over in bed, mumbling that he wasn't training today. He'd sleep a little longer. But a thunderous roar made him jump up immediately. Annoyed, he left the room grumbling that Dazi could stop making such a racket already, heading to prepare breakfast. While cooking, he commented that his familiar had indeed grown stronger, though completely exhausted physically, so something he found deeply unfair. Even so, he noticed he had improved a bit himself, gaining strength and speed. Even his cooking, like making pancakes, seemed faster. Looking at his two familiars, he remarked that it was good Dazi hadn't eaten junk during that time, since he had grown and now reached level 10. Still, Peng admitted he wasn't entirely sure if that method had truly increased Dazi's defense, remembering that he had nearly broken his arms in the process, and that feeding Dumby had almost bankrupted him. At that moment, his phone started ringing. Dumby noticed and brought it to his master, who answered on speaker. On the other end, a voice asked if he was speaking to Peng and introduced himself as Liu Senlin, general manager of the Blue Shield Security Company. Peng greeted him and, confused, asked why he was calling, since he didn't even know that company existed. Senlin replied that, on behalf of the company, he wanted to arrange an in-person meeting as the matter could be very beneficial for him, and asked if he had any time available to talk. Back at the studio, Quan welcomed Peng and informed him that the guest was already waiting. When he entered the room, a man stood up and asked if he was Peng. The protagonist confirmed and returned the question, wanting to know if he was really Senlin. The man smiled, saying it was a pleasure to finally meet him in person, and reaffirmed that he was indeed the general manager of the Blue Shield Insurance Company, as mentioned on the phone. Senlin explained that he was there to ask if Peng would be interested in working for the company as a consultant monster creator. The protagonist was surprised by the offer, but gestured for him to sit first. Once they were both seated, Peng asked why the manager had sought him out, pointing out that there were advanced monster creators in the city, while he was only an intermediate one. He said he didn't know what kind of reputation he had earned to make the general manager of a major security firm personally come to him, but he was sure it was some kind of exaggeration. Senlin laughed, saying Peng was being far too modest, and admitted that while there were indeed a few advanced creators in the city, one of them being the president of the Monster Creators Association, Mr. Chen, someone like that obviously wouldn't have time to act as a consultant for a small company like his. The other was Mr. Guxian Lin, who already worked full-time as a government consultant. That was why, among all the intermediate creators, Senlin preferred to trust a talented young man like Peng rather than anyone else. The protagonist replied that if that was the case, then before proceeding, he wanted to make his conditions clear. The negotiation would only continue if they were accepted. First, he explained, he had classes from Monday to Friday and, unless in urgent situations, should not be disturbed during the week. Second, he would accept the consultant position, but he would not sign any exclusivity agreement, although he guaranteed he would never assist any competitors of Blue Shield. Senlin smiled and said that was perfectly fine, accepting the terms, and then showed him a contract asking what Peng thought of the part-time model they had prepared. The protagonist began reading and was surprised. The contract was almost too generous. There were no mandatory clauses, the salary was 500 credits per year plus commissions, and an additional 50 credits for every successful evolution of the company's demonic mantises. That made Peng think that the owner of Blue Shield must be an extremely wealthy person. After carefully reading it and finding no disadvantages, he decided to sign. At that moment, someone knocked on the door. Quan Quan entered and announced that Mr. Ma, who had an appointment with him, had arrived a bit early. The general manager stood up, saying that since the contract was signed, there was no need to take more of Peng's time. They shook hands, and Senlin said he was very much looking forward to the collaboration between them. The protagonist thanked him for coming personally. As the manager stepped into the elevator, he called someone, reporting that the contract had been signed and that Peng had chosen the part-time model. Though he still didn't fully understand why there had been such insistence on that young man, he remarked that there were so many creators in the city, why go through all that trouble? He was interrupted by the person on the other end, listened carefully, and then replied that he understood. Meanwhile, in the treatment room, Peng was examining one of the monsters and asked the client if that was the familiar he had mentioned during his last visit. Mr. Ma confirmed that it was. With the help of the system, the protagonist analyzed and identified the creature as a wax begonia fairy, level 3, normal grade, wood attribute, in healthy and cheerful condition, weak to fire and electricity. The requirements for evolving to excellent grade were a 100-year wood essence and 100 drops of dew flower. Peng asked if the familiar was indeed of the flower type since its petals were beautiful, its leaves had a fuchsia pattern, and it emitted a soft fragrance. He then asked if the client truly wanted to evolve it, and Mr. Ma nodded, explaining that in half a month the Flower King competition would take place in the city, and he intended to compete for the crown with his familiar. The protagonist thought to himself that this competition was a parade of flora-type monsters. Although plants had undergone natural mutations, those that developed spiritual intelligence were rare. Due to their healing properties, flora types were more sought after than ghoul types, even if not rare, so that creature was indeed fortunate. Feeling a bit awkward, Quan Quan interjected, noting that usually only women participated in the Flower King competition. The client smiled, saying he knew that and admitted it was odd for a man to compete for the crown, but he gently held his familiar's vine and said he trusted her completely. With a loving look, he explained that the little creature was his second familiar and he wanted the very best for her. Determined, he asked Peng to help her evolve to increase her chances in the competition. Peng was surprised, realizing he hadn't noticed how much that man cared for his familiars. Pleased, he smiled and told him not to worry, assuring that everything would be in good hands. Snapping his fingers, he declared that the rule was simple. The price would be triple the normal rate. Quan Quan rushed excitedly with the card machine, her eyes shining as she asked the client to swipe his card. Once the payment was completed, Peng told her to gather the materials. 200-year wood essences, 150 drops of dew flower, 1 psionic leaf, 5 grams of fructus tuscendon, 500 grams of chestnut seeds, and 1 black venom herb. She confirmed everything was written down. Those were common ingredients and surely available in the storage room, and promised to bring them quickly. Shortly after, she shouted that everything was ready and set on the table. The protagonist thanked her and pushed both of them out, saying that no one should disturb an artist at work. The client tried to peek through the door, but the receptionist stopped him, saying it wasn't wise to interrupt Peng while he was working. As always, the protagonist looked like a mad scientist. He started laughing while holding a syringe, approaching the little creature and telling her she was a good girl, that it would just be a tiny prick and there was no need to be afraid. When he injected it, the small fairy let out a soft cry of pain, and the worried client tried to shout for him to stop, but the receptionist held him back, assuring him it was for his familiar's own good. A short while later, Peng called them back in, saying they could come see the results. The fairy had now evolved into a level 4 wax begonia, excellent grade, wood attribute, healthy and happy, still keeping the same weaknesses to fire and electricity. The client smiled in relief, saying it had worked, and Quan Quan, enchanted by the transformation, commented that she looked even more beautiful. Mr. Ma rushed over to Peng and hugged him enthusiastically, saying he was the best in the world. Peng looked uncomfortable and asked him to stop, insisting there was no need for such a display. Meanwhile, somewhere else, a woman asked a group of boys if they were really planning to give up again. The boys started leaving, saying that even if they passed the test, they wouldn't get into a good academy and would end up working 9-to-5 jobs. That is, if they could even find one. One of them added that either way, becoming monster trainers was out of reach, and now that they were stuck in that situation, getting out wouldn't be easy. Another boy tried to reassure them, saying it was fine. After all, only 1,200 people would be recruited, so they might as well relax for a month and take the test later, treating it like a vacation. The woman grew angry, glaring at them with contempt, thinking that those idiots didn't care what others thought. She decided she wouldn't give up and muttered to herself, telling Peng to wait for her. Outside the city, deep in the forest, a small monster was running in search of food when it was suddenly struck by sticky webs that immobilized it. Trembling in fear, it dug its claws into the ground and spun its body to break free, releasing spikes. But more webs fell from above. Several spiders surrounded and trapped it, closing in slowly. At Chenji's material shop, the protagonist showed up and asked for the usual, 15 kilos of yin cedar needles. Chenji apologized and explained that they were out of stock with only 5 kilos left. Peng, confused, asked how there could be a shortage when there was an entire area outside the city specialized in producing them. The shopkeeper sighed and said things had gotten complicated. Last week, a group of wild spiders appeared out of nowhere and devoured all the plants in the grove. Now, the entire area had been sealed off by the army. He showed Peng a report explaining that various monsters from nearby mountains and forests had also become their prey, and that if people hadn't escaped quickly, they would have been eaten too. The protagonist was shocked by the news. Just then, another customer entered the shop asking if there was any primary starlight wood available. The owner said yes and asked how much he wanted. Before attending to the new customer, he bid Peng farewell, saying he had to get back to work, but they could talk later if needed. Peng left the store deep in thought. First, the military school had started a new collaboration. Then, a security company had approached him. And now, a new species of spider had appeared out of nowhere. Everything pointed to one thing. Something big was about to happen. Suddenly, his phone rings. When he looks, he sees it Senlin calling. As soon as he answers, the manager asks if he heard about the new gray brutal devil spider discovered by an officer in the dark ember forest. Sometime later, the protagonist arrives at the Blue Shield Security Company, Building 1. Senlin runs up to him, saying it was urgent and that he couldn't explain over the phone. He asks him to come inside while he explains the situation. The manager shows him a recording, explaining that those devil spiders had attacked several resource points and that the government was gathering security companies and private organizations to explore the dark ember forest in order to learn the habits and weaknesses of these creatures. Their company received the invitation and would depart in 3 days, but they wanted to strengthen their familiars before then. For that reason, he wanted to ask the protagonist to check if it would be possible to evolve some of the devil mantises, as that would increase the chances of success in the mission. Senlin emphasizes that it's fine if Peng can't make them evolve. The protagonist replies that he first needs to see the condition of the mantises. Worried, Senlin asks Peng to give it his full attention, as the company sees this opportunity as something very serious. He explains that at the last conference, the alliance government abolished several regulations that restricted unofficial forces due to the changes monsters have undergone in recent years, which have overburdened the government. The manager stresses that this conference opened many opportunities, but fears the alliance's leadership might change direction, so he asks Peng to do his best. He then opens a door and shows all the devil mantises the company currently has, noting that they've also prepared enough manpower to assist if Peng needs help. He adds that as long as results are achieved, the rewards will be satisfying for both sides. Peng laughs and tells the manager not to worry, assuring him he won't disappoint. He approaches the mantises and begins to touch and examine them carefully. Another man enters the observation room and asks the manager what Peng is doing, since ever since he arrived, he's just been touching and looking, like an old man shopping. The man says he's confused, as Peng looks at most 20 years old, maybe even less, and questions if he's really capable of this. Senlin gets angry and tells the man to shut up, saying he doesn't know what he's talking about and that if he keeps making comments like that, not even his own sister will be able to protect him. The man starts trembling in fear and apologizes. The manager returns his gaze to Peng, thinking that he really doesn't know if this will work, but he's betting his entire future on that young man, so he must succeed. Suddenly, the protagonist stops and says, "The 8th to the left of the 1st row, the 4th to the right of the 4th row, the largest in the 7th row," and continues selecting a few more. Then he asks them to bring the 10 mantises he mentioned and prepare a laboratory, as well as a low-rank insect-type monster enhancement pharmacy, an earth-type core crystal, a star steel blade, perilla leaves, and 10 units of each. Senlin looks at the man beside him and shouts, ordering him to do everything Peng requested immediately. The manager looks back at the protagonist, astonished, thinking that in just 10 minutes, he managed to pick the 10 strongest among hundreds of familiars without a single mistake. That speed and precision are truly worthy of an intermediate breeder. perhaps even greater than a newly promoted advanced one. And the most impressive thing is that he's under 20 years old. Quickly, everyone starts preparing the area for the protagonist to work, and without wasting time, he begins mixing potions, pills, and other preparations. As Senlin walks through the corridors, he hears someone shouting that it worked. Shocked, he wonders if Peng really succeeded and rushes to the room to confirm. One of the Manuses starts undergoing a transformation, its body expanding until, within seconds, the monster becomes much larger and incomparably stronger. The people cheer, exclaiming that it evolved. The man who had doubted earlier approaches the manager, saying it's unbelievable and that he truly has a good eye for spotting geniuses, because that monster had turned into a four-winged Jade Devil Mantis, commander level, reaching the perfect grade, which only proves how extraordinary Peng is, a true national treasure. The next day, Peng is training Dazi and asks him to repeat the exercise. When timing it, he notices the time was 7.47 seconds, meaning 0.4 seconds faster than last time. As a reward, the protagonist calls his familiar, saying he'll give her some of her favorite dried worm. While training, he notices some people around laughing and chatting during practice. Looking around, he realizes that several students have already started slacking off and making a mess, but the instructors only care about the hard-working ones, completely ignoring the lazy ones. Still, he thinks that the lazy are the least desirable on a battlefield, so there's no reason to worry about them. Suddenly, a woman calls out to him. She approaches, saying she's noticed how dedicated he is in training. It's Mu Tianying, Peng's classmate. He's surprised to see she's taller than he imagined and thinks that if she were a man, she'd be a real brute. He thanks her for the compliment, and Tianying explains that she'd like to form a team with him. Confused, Peng asks why she wants to do that with him in particular. She clarifies that in the intermediate and final stages of training, the students will form teams to battle, and scores will be based on collective performance. Since no one else is as diligent as him, and no one seems willing to team up with her, she decided to invite him. Peng thinks the girl is pretty straightforward and that it'll be easier to talk to someone like that. He then asks where her familiar is. Tianying smiles, tells him to wait a moment, and whistles. A massive rhinoceros comes charging toward them, stopping right beside her. Slightly embarrassed, Tianying pets the creature and says that this is her girl named Lotus Seed, an iron rhinoceros. Peng and Dazi are impressed by the size of the familiar, and Tianying points out that before he agrees to team up, there's something he needs to know. Lotus is extremely shy and sometimes even gets scared of small monsters. The young woman crouches and excitedly adds that, despite that, her familiar is excellent in the defense class and has incredible pain resistance, probably due to having low sensitivity to it. Peng starts thinking that forming a team with that girl might not be a bad idea. Even though there are many familiars around, 99% of them belong to the common grade and only a few have reached the excellent grade. According to the system's analysis, her rhinoceros is level 12, elite tier, perfect grade, metal attribute in healthy and happy condition. That means there are only two familiars at the perfect grade, the iron rhinoceros being one of them, while Dazi follows an attack-focused path with the poison attribute. In that way, a defensive familiar would be the perfect combination, balancing their strengths perfectly. With her on the team, Dazi would have more room and time to attack as well as new strategic options. Tianying starts getting anxious, thinking Peng is taking too long to answer and might not want to team up with her. Feeling embarrassed, she turns and begins to walk away, thinking that because of her familiar's shyness, she might end up being a burden instead of a help. It wouldn't be fair to hold back the most dedicated student, even though she deeply wishes to be by his side. Before she gets too far, Peng calls out to her, asking her to wait and says that he accepts to form a team with her. Surprised and emotional, Tianying asks through tears if it's true. The protagonist smiles and replies that it doesn't matter if Lotus is shy. With enough training, that can change. Besides, he could never get along with lazy people anyway. Delighted, Tianying runs to him, grabs his hand, and thanks him for the opportunity, but her strength is so great that she ends up shaking Peng like a doll. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the dark Ember Forest, someone orders all group leaders to gather for a meeting in the clearing. Shortly after, a woman meets with the general manager. He laughs and comments that it looks like the captain isn't joking, adding that according to the latest official reports, this new species of spider shows a clear fear of fire, and the captain's team is the best at handling that element, which means she probably intends to lead the mission. The captain keeps her composure and replies that she'd never dare such a thing, emphasizing that the manager's devil manuses aren't called jungle assassins for nothing, and that she believes he'll be the first to complete the mission. The two stare at each other, as if locked in a silent battle. At that moment, an army officer draws everyone's attention and thanks them for coming. He states that they must all be aware of the new information discovered yesterday. The gray, brutal devil spiders are hunting on a large scale and taking their prey back to their nests, which indicates that they're storing food for the queen mother. Once she has enough food, she'll create a new order of spiders and might even attack the city. That's why the mission is of utmost importance, and cooperation among all teams is essential, since the top priority is completing it and ensuring that the rewards benefit every group involved. Some of the captains comment that they understand the military's concern, since the fear is that internal conflicts could jeopardize the progress of the mission, something perfectly reasonable, as disputes between teams only cause problems and could ruin everything. The captain then approaches the manager and asks what he thinks. He calmly replies that he's in no rush and, for now, prefers just to observe. The officer begins shouting, saying that since there are no objections, they'll proceed with the mission as planned. They'll handle the first spider suppression. He gives the order, and within 3 hours the cannons fire, wiping out several of them. Senlin remarks that the military first tried to convince them with words and now with firepower. Even if they act out of duty and responsibility, he doesn't fully agree with their methods, though he chooses to stay silent. He continues saying the government already knows how critical that mission is. Besides controlling the light, their firepower also weakens the monsters, forcing the other teams to produce results. Annoyed, the captain points at the mantises and asks why the manager is still standing still when he has 8 commander-level familiars, while some groups don't even have half that. Senlin chuckles and says the other groups are just hiding their trump cards, unlike him, who's honest and shows everything he has. Suddenly, a deafening noise echoes in every direction. The mantises start trembling, and a man comments that they seem to be afraid of something. Senlin asks what's going on, but another, even stronger tremor shakes the ground, and a massive monster emerges from the forest. The manager starts trembling, instantly recognizing that unmistakable aura. It's a Tier Lord monster. He shouts that it's the Lord of the Dark Ember Forest. The monster charges forward, unleashing a terrifying roar that makes everyone run in panic. The military commander watches them flee, thinking they're nothing but trash. Suddenly, a phoenix appears in the sky, and the people, relieved, point and cheer, saying it's the golden deity, the military's guardian beast. The Lord faces the phoenix, and with just one fiery attack realizes its power, retreating right after. The crowd celebrates, saying that thanks to the military, the Lord has retreated, and they breathe in relief, believing they've escaped annihilation. The commander walks up to the manager and says they'd better start moving soon, since they won't be able to hold that gorilla off for long. The order is given, and everyone starts regrouping. But the commander still can't understand why they have to let those useless groups do something they themselves could easily handle. A man with the blue hair steps in, saying they already understand the world is changing, and that this is a huge advantage for them. But those changes are beyond what they can control alone. The situation is starting to spiral, and for their own future, private organizations need to grow and start helping as soon as possible. Deep in the forest, inside a cave, the captain and her team are scouting the area, taking down small spiders along the way. One of her subordinates approaches, saying this isn't working. They're spending too much energy, and even though they kill the monsters in seconds, more keep showing up immediately after, quickly exhausting their familiars. The captain shouts an order to adjust formation. Defensive familiars at the front, support in the center, and offensive on the sides. The melee fighters should take the lead, and she stresses that no one is to use long-range abilities so they can keep advancing in formation. But several spiders appear, attacking one of the familiars quickly, and the same young woman from before calls on her Thornflower Fairy to use its thorn armor to protect the other familiar. The captain summons her own monster, saying it's time for it to act immediately, and her familiar engulfs all nearby spiders in flames. The young woman cheers, saying they took down 3 spiders at once without spending much energy, and that it looks like the tactics they practiced earlier paid off. The captain thanks her familiar for its good work, but soon they hear a noise farther ahead. The young woman shouts that it sounds like a fight, and judging by the noise, they must be close. The captain starts running ahead, saying they need to move faster. When they reach the edge of a cliff, they look down and see a group of trainers attacking a gigantic spider. However, their attacks seem ineffective. One of the fighters yells that the broodmother has little offensive power and is only large for better reproduction, weak for her level. Senlin takes command, saying they need to work together to kill the Spider Queen and then divide the reward based on the damage each group caused. He asks everyone to trust him, assuring them that he'll make a fair distribution of rewards. At his command, the long-range group should aim for the eyes while the rest attack the legs, and everyone agrees. However, the broodmother also had shields covering her eyes, so Senlin orders them to increase the power of their attacks. The young woman beside the captain says the situation is critical, and they need to go down to help, otherwise the military might lower their contribution score, and the other groups would avoid future cooperation. The captain agrees, saying that just standing by and watching could go wrong, and orders an immediate descent. though she feels something strange about that spider and has a bad premonition. Suddenly, the shield protecting the queen's eyes shatters, and the manager yells for everyone to attack with full force. The mantises charge forward and strike accurately. The broodmother begins to rage, and the captain immediately senses danger. A monstrous pressure bursts forth, making everyone's ears ache. Some even start bleeding from their eyes. Senlin, also affected, shouts, asking who the idiot was that said the spider wasn't good at attacking. But then he recognizes the aura. It's the same as the Lord's. He leaps onto one of the mantises and yells that the spider is evolving into a tier lord. They interrupted its evolution. He orders everyone to retreat immediately as there's no chance of defeating that monster. Outside, the military and agents wait. Some comment that more than 3 hours have passed and no one has returned, assuming it'll take at least 5 more. Suddenly, the commander senses something off, and the agents report that something is coming toward them. At first, they think the group finished the mission early, but the commander instantly understands what's really happening and orders all troops to prepare for battle. Senlin appears, shouting for the soldiers not to shoot. He's not an enemy. Upon landing, he collapses from exhaustion, and someone runs up to him asking why he's alone, where the others are, and what's going on. The manager stands up angrily, grabs the man by the tie, and demands to know if the government is trying to get them killed. They'd been told the broodmother wasn't dangerous to attack, but she was actually evolving into a tier lord. The commander intervenes, asking him to calm down and explain. Senlin lets go of the tie, still furious, and explains that while exploring the cave, they found the broodmother mid-evolution, and because of the overwhelming difference in power, they were slaughtered. To complete the mission, they sent their strongest familiars, but now all of them are dead inside. He adds that he doesn't know how many of his men managed to escape, and that just the pensions and compensation will cost a mountain of gold. The commander understands and also grows enraged, turning to the government agents and demanding how they could have given such ridiculous information and let this happen. Suddenly, another person emerges from the forest and the commander asks where the Spider Queen is. Did she follow him? The man answers that he's not exactly sure what happened, but he thinks the broodmother went after the others and they split up to escape after leaving the cave. The soldiers exchange glances as more survivors begin to appear, apologizing for failing to protect the rest. They barely escaped becoming spider food themselves. The commander says that if they had known earlier that the spider was evolving into a tier lord, they could have sent stronger reinforcements. He adds that if they'd managed to tame the Spider Queen, she would have been a tremendous asset to the military zone. But the government made a grave mistake this time. However, since the spider failed to complete its evolution, it's now useless, and they don't need to worry anymore, because 2 tigers can't live on the same mountain. The Lord of the Dark Ember Forest won't allow another tier lord in his territory. Sometime later, back at the academy during training, Dazi was evolving rapidly, which sparked envy among some students who scolded their own familiars, saying that if they trained as hard, they could also evolve better. Peng begins to wonder whether what happened was bad luck or good fortune. After all, Senlin had encountered 2 tier lord monsters and 1 almost lord just from accepting a government mission. That showed how much more dangerous the wild zones were becoming. The selling price of a normal tier monster's body was very low, and an elite tier's was only slightly better, only worthwhile in large quantities. That's why he needed to make Dumby and Dazi advance to commander tier as soon as possible, and then go hunting in the wild zones. Once they advanced, his reputation as a monster breeder would be established, and he could go to Yanjing to obtain his advanced monster breeder certification, 1 main profession, monster trainer, and 1 secondary breeder, which would allow him to follow his path. Dumby had already reached level 14, but unfortunately, no one had completed the mission he had posted in the Monster Hunters Guild, and he had already used up all his yin cedar needles. Now, Dumby just sat in front of the refrigerator every day staring at it. As for Dazi, after all the training, she had reached level 13. That's when Tiaying arrived and showed him the defensive familiar training guide she had mentioned before. Peng takes the guide and starts flipping through it, realizing that Tiaying didn't choose to form a team with him by chance. She seemed well prepared, and with those notes, they could plan tactics based on their familiar's traits. On one page, it said, "For a defensive familiar, a will of steel is far more important than physical defense. Therefore, rigorous and intense training is required." Peng smiles, wondering if she's really serious, and when Tiaying notices his expression, she asks what's wrong. The protagonist simply replies that it's nothing. He just thinks she's going too easy on Lotus. Suddenly, the loudspeaker announces that all students must gather in front of the stage as there would be no individual training that day. Once everyone assembles, the instructor announces that it's the last day of the first training phase, and before starting the second, he'll reveal a list of names. He begins, Liu Keshu eliminated, Xie Jiangyi eliminated, Hu Yantian eliminated, and lastly, Wu Yonghuan eliminated. He orders all the named students to leave the field immediately. Some begin shouting, claiming it's unfair and demanding to know why they were eliminated. The instructors grow angry and ask if they have a problem with that, saying they've been watching everything they've done for weeks and should already know they've been fooling themselves. One instructor turns to Zi Jiangyi and asks if the phone is more important than training, while to Hu Yantian he asks if it was comfortable sleeping during practice, adding that from tomorrow on she'll get to rest in a softer bed. He goes on, saying that if they can't even put effort into the first phase, there's no reason for them to stay, because the second phase involves real combat. Anyone keeping that lazy attitude will not only be useless, but also endanger their own familiars' lives through sheer incompetence. The students are startled upon hearing that real battles are next. One of them, excited, asks if they'll fight real monsters and brags that his teddy is strong and will easily win against anyone. Another snaps back saying that Mutt looks like a joke and would probably panic at a scratch, adding that if he wants to fight, he should face something like his own yellow-tailed Scorpion King. The two start arguing and taunting each other. One of the instructors orders everyone to form groups of 5 as they're about to begin real combat training, each group under a designated constructor, and tells them to hurry up. The same two arguing students run to Peng and Tia Ying's side, saying the others should find their own groups because they've already chosen theirs. The students organize into groups, and then the head instructor appears, smiling and greeting the protagonist. He introduces himself formally as Zhang Renbai, saying he'll be their team's instructor. With a menacing air, he laughs and asks who wants to be the first constructor, revealing the first monster, a steel-bristled boar, level 9, normal grade, slightly injured but aggressive. The two young men look terrified and ask if they can pick another monster. Renbai shows another one with a calmer appearance and asks what they think. The protagonist observes and recognizes it as a bloodthirsty hyena, level 10, excellent grade, wounded and on high alert. He evaluates that since it's of excellent grade, it's stronger than the boar and even has poison resistance, but the injuries make it unstable. He thinks that if that hyena catches the scent of blood and goes berserk, it'll be far more dangerous than the boar, so he decides not to let the instructor switch monsters. He raises his hand and steps forward, saying that if no one else wants to, he'll go first. Renbai releases the boar and the protagonist prepares for battle, ordering his familiar to charge. The boar charges furiously, trying to attack, but Dazi moves swiftly, dodging nimbly and climbing onto the monster's back. With a firm bite to the head, Dazi makes the boar scream in pain, turning even more violent. The beast spins its body and slams Dazi hard, throwing him to the side and shaking the ground. The two boys watching grow tense, thinking the protagonist is about to lose. Peng quickly analyzes the situation. At first glance, his familiar seems at a disadvantage, but the system shows something different. The steel-bristled boar is now poisoned. Its condition changes from slightly injured to injured, which means Dazi is starting to take control of the fight. The poison was injected along with the attack, and the more the boar moves, the faster it spreads. Moments later, the boar starts trembling and collapses, its condition now severely injured. The two boys and their familiars are stunned, not understanding what just happened, since the boar seemed to have the upper hand. Renbai explains that the boar's face has turned bluish, and judging by that, it's been poisoned. The chubby boy, confused, asks how that's possible. One of the instructors approaches Peng and congratulates him, saying he's passed the day's training since his centipede displayed good combat instincts and an effective toxin. However, the instructor warns him not to overuse poison, or his creature might become dependent on it and end up powerless against enemies immune or resistant to venom. Peng thanks him for the advice and begins feeding his familiar, while the instructor, impressed, comments that the centipede acts more like a trained dog than an insect. Renbai declares that the steel-bristled boar can still fight and asks who will go next. The black-haired boy steps forward, saying he'll be the second and that his scorpion will surely finish the boar off. The chubby one mocks him, saying that's obvious since his lazy scorpion could only win against a drowning dog. The dark-haired boy snaps back, saying that's exactly why his scorpion is perfect. It's meant to take down filthy dogs like his. The instructor, annoyed, orders them to stop arguing and continue the training. The second combatant commands his scorpion to advance, telling it to use its stinger and poison the boar to death. The boar, already on the verge of collapse, is quickly finished by the scorpion, and the boy bursts out laughing, saying the result was expected. His yellow-tailed Scorpion King won easily. But then, something unexpected happens. His familiar starts trembling, foaming at the mouth, and collapses unconscious. The boy screams in panic, asking what happened and why his powerful Scorpion King suddenly fainted. Peng explains that it happened because the scorpion was poisoned, and the boy, shocked, asks how that's possible. Taiying clarifies that the protagonist's centipede venom was still inside the boar's body, and not all poisonous familiars have resistance to toxins. The boy realizes that his own familiar ended up poisoning itself. The chubby student bursts out laughing, mocking that the scorpion is as dumb as its master. The dark-haired one points to the side and snaps that the fat one laughs too much, but doesn't even watch his own familiar. Turning around, the boy sees his dog about to bite the boar and rushes to grab Teddy, shouting that he can't eat that. Meanwhile, Tianying walks up to Peng, saying she has a question, while the scorpion's trainer hurriedly gives his familiar an antidote. Renbai, clearly irritated, mutters that dealing with this team won't be easy. Later, when Peng returns home, he finds Dumby opening and closing the refrigerator repeatedly, as if believing food might appear out of nowhere. The protagonist feels sorry for him until his phone rings. Answering it, he realizes it's the association, probably about the needles he ordered. The voice on the other end informs him that the mission has been completed and the items are ready for pickup at the scheduled time. Peng quickly puts on his shoes and runs out excitedly, saying they finally arrived. If he went much longer without the needles, he might have had to change Dumby's entire evolution route. Outside, a robot is waiting with the delivery while a few people watch from a distance. One of them tells the boss that this is the kid who spent a lot of money to get the yin cedar needles. The boss confirms and says they've been following the truck from the Hunters Association warehouse, ensuring there's no mistake, and that tonight they'll break into the boy's house. One of the men, hesitant, asks if they're really going through with it, but the boss gets angry and calls him useless. Another member punches the hesitant one in the head, saying that as long as they're careful and leave no traces, everything will go smoothly. The boss agrees and says the green-haired boy is right, but they won't act yet. They need to plan every step carefully, and once they get the money, they'll flee immediately. When night falls, the three of them get ready for the robbery, excited by the idea of doing something far more thrilling than ordinary theft. However, one of them looks around uneasily, finding the neighborhood so poor it seemed worse than the hole they came from, and asks if the kid is really rich. The boss replies that's even better. It means he has no backing and probably just got lucky, making him an easy target. When they reach the apartment, they start trying to force the door open, making noise in the process. Tang Tang opens it, confused, and asks what they're doing there in the middle of the night. They try to play it off, saying the hallway was dark and they must have gotten the wrong door. Without suspicion, she begins to close it, saying it's fine, but the boss stops her and with a fake smile says they're just thirsty and asks if they can come in for a glass of water. Tang Tang smiles politely and, unaware of the danger, lets them in. They start laughing, and the boss confidently asks why they haven't thanked him yet. As soon as they enter, one of the men locks the door, and Tang Tang, surprised, asks why. The boss rubs his hands together with a cynical grin, saying it's just so they don't disturb the neighbors so late at night. She stares at him calmly and, with a terrifying smile, replies that they can relax. The walls are soundproof, so even if someone screamed, no one would hear. The three thieves exchange uneasy looks, and one of them nervously asks what that thing behind her is. The killing intent radiating from Tang Tang makes them freeze in terror. The boss tries to keep his composure, pulls out a dagger, and lunges forward, but he's defeated in the blink of an eye. The other two panic, and the youngest orders his familiar, Thorn, to attack to help the boss. But Tang Tang's familiar catches it midair and devours it in seconds. She gently pets it, asking why it's eating trash again. Suddenly, she's struck by a blow. The boss gets up, laughing in relief, thanking his familiar for hitting that woman, saying he wants to see if she'll still act so arrogant now. But when he looks closely, he realizes only part of her clothing was torn. Desperate, he screams, demanding to know why she isn't hurt. Tang Tang keeps laughing and replies that she could explain it, but he wouldn't understand. Then her eyes change, the Sharingan activates, glowing intensely, and she says that actually she'll explain it very clearly, since they have all the time in the world. The three men scream in terror as she advances, and on the other side of the hallway in his room, Peng tosses in bed, annoyed by the noise, wondering why people were still awake at that hour. After effortlessly taking down the intruders, Tang Tang calls Old Chi, reporting that she has 3 new volunteers with her and asking him to send someone to pick them up. She adds that there's no need to worry. They're all well trained, and she guarantees they'll protect the border until their last breath. The next morning, training resumes, and the students' familiars, including Peng's, can't even scratch their opponent. Peng watches in surprise as Dazi fails to break through the defense and asks if that thing is a water bear since it's his first time seeing a monster with such peculiar traits. The system identifies it. Mutant water bear, level 12, elite, normal grade. Condition, healthy, lazy. Weakness, fire. Rapid water loss can lead to death by dehydration. Being sliced results in instant death. Special trait, cryptobiosis. When entering the state, the mutant water bear curls up and reduces its metabolic rate to an extremely low level, drastically increasing all resistances. Peng reflects that it might be time to look for a third familiar and considers forming a contract with the water bear. He thinks about how incredibly resilient these creatures are, known to survive in space, resist radiation, endure temperatures below 200 degrees Celsius, and even withstand microwaves. After the cataclysm, their vitality evolved further, granting resistance to several rare attributes. The protagonist keeps assessing the situation, realizing that even though the water bear has incredible self-defense capabilities, it wouldn't work well in a team setting to protect the others. Therefore, he decides to set that idea aside and instead look for a long-range attacker, or a defensive familiar. And if he can find one with healing or flying abilities, even better. While he's lost in thought, Tianying and Lotus finish off the hyena. She approaches celebrating and the instructor rushes to stop her, asking her to calm down. When large monsters are fighting, people must stay away from the battlefield to avoid unnecessary accidents. Peng smiles at the sight, realizing that Lotus Seed's shyness has lessened a lot since their training began. His phone rings, and it's manager Senlin asking if he's free today. The protagonist asks why, and the manager says he'd like to invite him to lunch. Some friends are visiting, and he'd like to introduce them to him. Peng doesn't quite understand why the manager suddenly sounds so flattering, but it makes sense. After all, since the Dark Ember Forest incident, the company had suffered great losses, and since Peng is now an intermediate-level monster breeder, Senlin probably wants more of his help in the business. Peng agrees to go and tells the manager to meet him at the school gate after classes in the late afternoon. When classes end, Senlin is already waiting outside. Peng gets in the car and apologizes for the trouble, but the manager waves it off, saying it's no trouble at all. He often passes that way since his daughter attends the same school, so it was just convenient to pick him up. His daughter Liu Jiaoyu, sitting in the back seat, rolls her eyes and calls her father a liar, saying this is only the second time he's ever gone to her school, and the first was just to enroll her. Senlin quickly changes the subject, saying that, in any case, if Peng ever has free time, he'd like him to take a look at his daughter's familiar. Peng glances back and sees it's a cat-type familiar, a rare sight. He quickly scans it and finds it's a mint cat, level 12, normal grade, wood attribute, weakness, water. Smiling, he says he's usually at his studio on weekends, so she can come for a consultation then. Zhao Yu brightens up and asks if he's serious. The manager stops the car in front of their house, telling his daughter she can go in and that they'll talk about it later since he and Peng still have business to discuss. She gets out smiling, thanks Peng again for offering to help, and waves goodbye. Peng, puzzled, wonders what's going on. If they're just meeting some friends, why did the manager send his daughter home first? Everything feels increasingly suspicious. As the car drives off, Peng asks who these friends are, and Senlin simply replies that he'll find out soon enough. A short while later, they arrive at a temple, and the manager asks him to come in. As they walk through the entrance, Peng takes in the scenery. The place is styled like an English garden, probably designed by a master landscaper familiar with both northern and southern aesthetics. Dining in such a refined place could only mean the manager's friends weren't ordinary people. When they reach the main hall, Senlin says everyone's already there and invites Peng inside so he can introduce him. The first introduction is Captain Song Si, the second, Captain Jiang Gu. Jiang comments that Senlin had been so secretive before that he never imagined he'd bring along a little boy. Peng glares slightly annoyed, realizing it's no coincidence that everyone there represents a monster hunting group. The looks directed at him are filled with curiosity and greed, and it unsettles him deeply. Senlin tries to lighten the mood, saying that since everyone's here, they can begin eating, but Jiang raises a hand and says to wait. Staring at Peng, he says the boy doesn't seem very happy, asking if he's upset about being summoned so suddenly. The captain, Song Si, cuts in, asking what Jiang is trying to do. Scaring a kid would be disgraceful, especially if word about it spread. Senlin explains that he hadn't told Peng anything about the meeting, so the boy had no idea they'd be gathering there. The manager apologizes, admitting the invitation was impulsive and poorly arranged. Jiang nods in understanding and shifts his tone to something more respectful. He says they've wanted to meet Peng for quite some time to ask for some advice, but it's been extremely difficult to find him. He then asks Peng to come closer and join them. The others, too, act a bit more polite, inviting him to sit at the table to eat and drink with them, adding that it'd be a waste to spend the time just chatting. They might as well take the opportunity to seek his insight. Peng notices that, though they sound friendly, their words reek of pretense, and it's clear they have ulterior motives. The manager apologizes again, saying he didn't handle things properly. Peng stays irritated, thinking that he's ended up putting the manager in a position where his debt now far exceeds whatever he was paying. In other words, he owes him. Even so, Peng decides to see just how far this red marriage will go. Jiang sets his chopsticks down on the table and says he's a straightforward man and has a few things to say. Jiang points out that the rumors about the protagonist describe him as an extremely talented young man with a 100% success rate in monster evolutions, and he asks if Peng is really as miraculous as people say. Peng laughs and replies that it's not quite like that. All that fame comes from examiner Feng Xu's care and guidance, but adds that if they ever need help, they can visit him at his studio or through Senlin's company for a proper consultation. The captain smiles, saying Peng's words are quite straightforward and that since he's a friend of manager Senlin, then he'll consider him a friend as well. He emphasizes that it's only natural for friends to help each other. So why would they need to involve a company in between? The others echo the same sentiment, treating him as though he were just another friend and claiming that mixing business with friendship isn't right. Peng starts to grow irritated again, realizing these people are treating him like an idiot. Feeling disrespected, he simply stands up and starts to leave. Senlin quickly asks him to wait, but Peng apologizes to the captains, saying he's just a high school student who's only been in the field for a short time, so he can't accept such important tasks. The manager apologizes on his behalf, saying he didn't organize the meeting properly and asks Peng to wait a moment so he can drive him home. Peng declines, saying there's no need, as he's already called a rideshare that's on its way. A few minutes later, the car arrives and he leaves. Some of the guests comment that he's just an ungrateful brat while others defend him, saying he's still a kid and not worth getting angry over. Senlin apologizes to everyone again, saying his intentions were good but things didn't turn out as he expected. The others eventually accept his apology, saying they should get back to dinner. After all, the manager had gone through the trouble of arranging the meeting, and the real fault lay with that immature young man. Jiang pats Senlin on the shoulder and says that this time he helped lure Peng in and build ties with the other groups, so the favor the manager owed him since the Dark Ember Forest incident is now repaid. Senlin laughs, saying there's no need to talk like that since they're longtime friends and should always help each other. Jiang denies it, saying favors are favors, and they are not friends. As he walks away, he thinks that Peng had helped the manager tremendously. Yet even so, Senlin acted that way toward him, so what the hell would he do if they were truly friends? He concludes that the man is nothing more than an old fox. For those still unfamiliar, here's a quick recap of ranks and tiers. Normal tiers range from level 1 to 10, Elite from 11 to 20, Commander from 21 to 40, and Lord is the highest class. As for grades, they follow this order: normal, excellent, superior, perfect, epic, and hidden. Now that we're clear on that, don't forget to like and subscribe. Love you all. Once again, night falls, the protagonist returns home and decides to watch a bit of TV. On the news, the Alliance News Channel reports that the Blue Magic Genetic Enhancement Serum released by the United Dragons Group is a scam with severe side effects. In the Neon region, there have been multiple cases of malicious mutations in familiars that use the serum. The United Dragons Group has announced a global recall of the product. Even just watching through the broadcast, Peng's system analyzes the familiar shown in the footage and identifies from the image that its status is injured, as its blood vessels have been damaged. The report continues, informing customers that anyone who purchased the product can request a full refund at United Dragons Group stores. Scientists from various countries state that genetic enhancement serum is an inevitable step forward and that the public should face it actively instead of rejecting it. Peng's phone rings again. It's the manager. Surprised, he wonders why Senlin would be calling at that hour. He answers, asking what he can do for him. Senlin starts by saying he truly feels sorry for what happened, admitting that the incident earlier that evening was his fault. He explains that he should have told Peng in advance who those people were but didn't, as he never imagined they'd act so disrespectfully. Peng tells him not to worry and that he doesn't care about such things. Senlin insists, asking him to trust him and saying that if those people dared to behave that way, it means they also offended the Blue Shield group, and that from now on, before he can finish, Peng hangs up on him. Irritated, he thinks he doesn't really blame those people for trying to take advantage of him. It's his own fault for still not being strong enough to tell all those idiots to go to hell. Staring intently at the television, Peng reflects that, for now, he can only play by the rules, at least until he has enough power to change them. The program changes, and the host announces that the first King of Dogs of Yangcheng contest concluded successfully the day before. Participants came from Yangcheng, Rongcheng, and Pengcheng. The monster breeder Han Ning, 21 years old, won the championship, and his familiar became the first King of Dogs of Yangcheng. Peng studies the data on the screen. The creature's name is Starfall Autumn Dog, level 39, commander tier, perfect grade. The host continues explaining that, according to reports, Ning is still a university student, currently in his third year at the Yangcheng Institute of Science and Technology. Peng lowers his gaze, thoughtful. In just 3 years, that young man managed to evolve his familiar to commander tier and perfect grade, placing him among the strongest people in the world. Determined, Peng murmurs to himself that Ning should wait for him, because soon he'll be just as powerful. The next day, in the cultivation room of his studio, Peng is with Dumby, preparing a potion. He hands the vial to his familiar and tells him to drink it. Meanwhile, Zhao Yu arrives, accompanied by her friends. One of them looks around and asks if this is really the studio of the famous Mr. Peng she keeps talking about. Zhao Yu confirms with a smile. Another friend, curious, asks why she calls him Mister if they're the same age, and if it's because he's like her. Zhao Yu turns and starts tickling her, calling her a brat and asking how she dares imply she's old. The two burst out laughing while the third watches amused. At that moment, Quan Quan appears and greets them warmly, welcoming them to Flying Rock Studio. She asks if they have an appointment, making the girls exchange puzzled looks and wonder if booking ahead is really necessary. One of them glances around, noting how empty the place seems, and asks if business is really that good to require scheduling. Quan Quan says that if they don't have an appointment, she can call the boss to confirm a slot. Zhao Yu pauses, remembering her father's words, that this Mr. Peng is one of the best monster breeders in the city, the greatest genius of Chang'an, and thinks that the only downside is the high fee, which must be why there are so few clients. While they're chatting, a deafening roar echoes from the cultivation room, followed by an overwhelming pressure that fills the air, making the girls feel faint and gasp for breath, asking what that sound was. Inside the cultivation room, Dumby begins evolving, and an intense aura bursts from his body. When the process ends, Peng checks the system. The skeletal ghoul monkey has reached level 16, epic grade, ghoul attribute, light weakness, and acquired the special trait, Heart of Blood Threads. Excited, he opens the details. Special trait, Heart of Blood Threads. Effect 1, active. Consumes a certain amount of blood threads and energy to form a heart of blood threads. While active, all physical aspects of the skeletal ghoul monkey are enhanced. The effect ends when the heart is destroyed. Effect 2. When the heart of blood threads is consciously activated, it triggers heart resonance, allowing control over the heartbeat of other beings. Peng celebrates, realizing Dumby's combat power will increase dramatically with this addition, but then frowns, noticing a new problem. His familiar now looks like a Susanu, and that kind of flashy form is anything but discreet. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new content. Thank you.